you please bow your heads? Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening and pray that you'll bless all of our actions and decisions tonight and give us the wisdom we need to make the proper ones. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Madam Clerk, if you please call the roll. Okay. Okay.
Mayor J. Max Davis.
Here.
Councilmember John Park, District 2.
Here.
Councilmember Chase Williams, District 1.
Present.
Councilmember Bates Madison, District 3.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Gebbia, District 4.
Here.
All present, we have a quorum. And I need to read the rules for the meeting. The purpose of public comments is to allow residents of Brookhaven or other members of the public to voice their city-related concerns, requests, and opinions. The public comments portion of meetings is reserved exclusively for comments from the public and not for immediate reply. Audience members shall respect the rights of the speakers to be heard and be aware that Brookhaven's decorum rules for public meetings are still in effect during public comments. In order to respect the rights of all citizens, the following rules will control the public comments portion of Brookhaven's meetings. 1, handouts and displays should be approved by the city clerk prior to the meeting. 2, prior to speaking, each speaker will complete a speaker card and present it to the clerk before the beginning of the public comment portion of the meeting. The public comments portion of the meeting will last 30 minutes, and speaker cards will be accepted on a first-come, first-served basis. 3, each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes to speak and will identify themselves by name, address, and if applicable, their organization before beginning their presentation. 4, in order to respect the time of each speaker and the rights of all citizens who wish to speak, neither the mayor nor any council member nor any citizen of Brookhaven staff should cut a speaker's time by engaging in dialogue, answering questions, or responding to individual issues, concerns, or questions raised by the speaker. 5, only after all speakers have been heard and the public comments portion of the meeting has been closed will the mayor and council be able to address any concerns raised by speakers. Any member of the public who does not get an opportunity to speak will be allowed to speak first at a subsequent meeting, and the clerk will hold their speaker card until the date they choose to return.
All right. Thank you. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I have a couple opening remarks. We'd like to welcome our new communications director, Rosemary Taylor, to the city of Brookhaven. Will you please stand, Rosemary? A hand for her. Thank you. Rosemary comes to us from Johns Creek, and where all you worked in Los Angeles and in New York for CBS. You want to give us a little quick 30-second bio?
Into the mic, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I spent about 20 years in the media, and I'm originally from the South, but went to New York after college, and then went to Los Angeles after New York, and I have a very wide and diverse assortment of or experience in the media and in public relations. And the last 8 years I've been with Johns Creek and helped them get started. I started with them a month before they even became a city. So I'm looking forward to doing the same good work down here. And I'm very happy to be part of the team and excited about being an IP girl and not an OP girl anymore.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rosemary. All right. Also, on the 23rd of this month, that's February 23rd, that's a Monday, at 12:30, isn't that right, 12:30? There's going to be a screening of a very important movie called 8 Days. It relates to, it's a dramatization of actual events on human sex trafficking that occurred in the United States, in Texas mainly. And Councilwoman Williams and I screened this movie a couple weeks ago with the GMA. It's a very powerful film. It's very important that we highlight this issue. You know, Rebecca and I have talked that, you know, we don't want to be known as a city that concentrates on sex trafficking, but there's a fine line there. We through Councilman Gebbia bringing us the street grace program last year, and all of our efforts since then have been to highlight this important issue to make sure that while it's not common in Brookhaven, it has happened, but through our efforts and your efforts, we can make sure that it becomes, the occurrences never happen in Brookhaven. And so that's why this issue is important, and this screening is important. It's a very important issue, and we will continue our efforts to make sure that Brookhaven is leading the state and in some instances the nation when it comes to stamping out this horrible crime. Joe, do you have any comments about that?
We premiered this film at the Mayor's Day luncheon or breakfast that we had last week or a week or two ago, and it was only a 2 or 3 minute airing, and it was tremendously impactful. Highly recommend that you attend and or pass the word on, just to make sure that you have an understanding of how important it is and to protect our children.
Thank you.
I would just add that it made me feel so proud that we've gone to such levels to train our staff and especially our police, because really they're the front line on this. I didn't realize that Homeland Security was really one of the lead agencies on this. I know we've worked with the GBI and the FBI, but Homeland Security plays a big role in this film. And at the panel discussion afterwards, the Homeland Security people were saying that this really, sex trafficking has really become their #1 priority issue, even replacing drug trafficking as a growing problem. And that was kind of news and shocking to me. I also told my colleagues that this movie is a great testimony to strong mothers who are strict with their kids and don't ever be afraid to be a tiger mom on this, because it's the mom who really gets things moving to solve this case here. Anyway, it's a great film.
The chief was there as well, and we thank the chief for his efforts and the staff that we have working on this issue, and thank the staff of the city. I think we all took the seminar. The staff and the police department have all taken the training that Street Grace offered. So we're doing a good thing here, and I want to keep it up. And thank you to Joe again for.
The example that we set, just as an update, 6 cities now have officially requested to become like Brookhaven, where the state standard, and 2 cities outside of, I think I mentioned this last time, one from Indiana and one from the state of Washington, have specifically said to Street Grace, what do we have to do to be like Brookhaven, Georgia? So this is all good.
All right. Okay, agenda announcements, are there any? All right, public comment. Do we have any public comment for the first section?
I have one public comment. The other 2 are for the tree ordinance. I don't know if they want to speak now or later when we get down to that part.
Okay.
But Terrell Karstens would like to speak on Osborne Park.
Good evening. Terrell Karstens, 2444 Oostenala Drive, speaking as a private citizen only. I have one question. If the county has checked the cans at Osborne Park, can we just confirm that the ones we have identified are the ones that they're talking about and not have to go through this whole environmental process and all of that? Because if it's the 3 I know of, there's nothing in it. So if the county can tell us where they identified them and what they were, it may be the same ones we're talking about, and there's really no need for the huge expense to.
Can you hold on one second?
Okay.
Did the county identify the cans for us and then we had them tested, or they just said some cans?
No.
What?
The whole reason why they were identified was because of the Phase 1 report.
Okay, does the Phase 1 report mention the number or the location?
There are pictures, and yes, it does mention a number as well.
Have you
Okay.
seen it?
Can we just kind of verify that the ones that have been looked at are those ones in the photo or the ones they identified?
The ones that were identified in the Phase 1 reports are the ones that were requested for additional testing based on what they saw.
Okay, all right. So, all right. But what I'm getting at is I want to make sure that if those are the cans that a citizen has gone out there and looked at, and if we've had some staff look at it, I think I think we're probably safe. I want to verify that what was identified in the report is what the citizen who looked at it, and then we can send a staff member out there to look at those cans as well, to verify that they're not some other section or not some other group of cans,
But there are more.
or that they're more.
We can pull photos and
Do you have a quick question or comment about that?
Are you saying not to move forward on those cans identified with
No,
the
no, no.
phase two? Okay.
I just want to know if the ones that have been identified are the ones that we know really don't have anything in them.
Well, the ones, whatever they are, the ones that are identified in the Phase 1 report is what's going to be tested,
Right.
correct.
only those.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, I'm sorry.
If it's the three that I've seen and I know of, one's plastic, there's nothing in it.
Right.
So it's just, I thought might save us some money.
Okay, all right.
And then I had one more thing that I wanted to go over with this recreation board or commission or whatever and so forth. I would like to suggest that you possibly come down a little bit on it, because what we're needing right now is a strong foundation to build from. It's a lot more to the basics. And if you give us the opportunity to wait until we finish and present to you these 3 visioning sessions we've done, I think there's going to be some big surprises, some good information, some shocking information that is smart, great information, that's very simple, very non-expensive. But going to this big board right now, since we're not going to go down with the hotel motel tax right now, I just don't see the point of it being so big in 1 year and meeting once a year, and it needs to start off, I think, at a lower level and build from there. Because if it starts out way up here, nothing's going to get accomplished, and it's just my fear. So I just wanted to put that bug in your ear to start the foundation and build from there instead of downward. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, next?
Okay, the other two want to speak about the tree ordinance. Do you want to hear them now? Do they want to speak now or later?
I mean, you can speak about anything on the agenda at the public comment section, right? Yeah, so if they want to come now, they can. If they want to wait till we address the tree ordinance.
We have Tom Riley.
Hi. In case any of you have forgotten, my name's Tom Riley, and I'm with the National Wildlife Federation in this area. And the address is 1779 Remington Road, of course, Brookhaven. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Brookhaven tree canopy, the past, the present, and the future of that. I think we're all kind of agreed that greed's a very short-sighted emotion. People who possess greed, they all seem to have this unsmiling, unsleeping, totally ruthless concentration on themselves. They take what they want, when they want it, no matter who or what gets hurt in the process. Sometime back, we passed a series of tree ordinances to protect our portion of a priceless resource we have here in the metro Atlanta area, which is the largest urban forest on earth. They don't call Atlanta the city built in a forest for nothing. And we got something on the books, and we agreed to tweak that something to adjust our needs for the future. And since that time, we've watched developers clear-cut lot after lot, cram houses into lot after lot, pay whatever financial penalties we had for them to pay under the circumstances, and then try to pass off as neighborhoods, well, areas that seem more like human warehouses with saplings in the middle of them. And, well, saplings are like people. They take about 30 years to mature. We've all been through a lot of things together in the years since Brookhaven was conceived and founded. I think we're real people. And real people deserve real homes with real trees. We deserve to have stiffer penalties for cutting specimen trees. And we deserve not only the preservation, but the recognition, even the enhancement of these riparian buffers, which are so very crucial to the health of the environment in this area. And we would deserve the removal, in my opinion, of any cap on penalties for any developer who tries to clear-cut our land. We agreed to tweak these ordinances as we move into the future. It's time to tweak. Thanks.
Thank you. Next?
Sally Epstein.
My name is Sally Epstein. My address is 1202 Gale Drive, Brookhaven, Georgia, 30319. I really started getting involved with the city of Brookhaven by trying to beautify it. You know, I wanted to bring art to the city, but tearing down the trees, to me, which is one of the biggest sculptures, especially in the wintertime when you can see all the big branches, is gorgeous. I'm really saddened by all the destruction of all the clear cutting. I'm going to read a letter I wrote to you today. I am not going to repeat what Tom said, but I do agree with everything that Tom said, and I agree that not only a little tweaking, we need a ton of tweaking. And this is a letter I wrote to you today along with all the clear cutting along Chamblee-Dunwoody Road. First, I'm going to start with a quote. "A nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. Forests are the lungs of our land and purifying the air and giving fresh strength to our people. You too are working on trying to get the biking paths and the walking paths. So having fresh air is huge, and that should be one of your number one important things, including these paths. I used to cycle. I won the Georgia title. I know about cycling. I used to have asthma when I cycled. I've quit, now I play tennis. My asthma's gone away. So I'm very familiar with asthma and the air quality. This is my letter. And you all receive this. Dear new city of Brookhaven, this is a new city, and the responsibility of all the clear cutting of old growth trees can only be forced on our new city mayor, city manager, and council. J. Max Davis, Joe Gebbia, Rebecca Chase Williams, and Bate Matheson. Each one of you cannot blame anyone else for all this destruction. I heard it be blamed on zoning, the arborists, the developers, the old tree ordinance, the new tree ordinance, and the demand for the zip code 30319. Mr. J. Max Davis, trees are historical too, and a lot harder to replace than old granite curbing. It's just a lot harder. Mr. J. Max, I would like to hear what you are going to do to lead your arborist, your zoning board, your councilman, your city manager, and your tree ordinance to help protect the old growth trees from being clear cut for the name of high density rapid growth. I started a petition because I'm so passionate about this. This petition is growing every day. I just checked it and it's up to 445. Thank you.
Next.
I don't have any more.
I did read the email already. So.
Yes, we're at the consent agenda. We have 5 items on the agenda, 3 of which are meeting minutes, the reappointment of our 2 judges, and a resolution in support of the trails, walking, and bicycling infrastructure for the DOT projects.
I'd kind of like to just recognize the judges before, just rather than lumping it in the.
Okay, Chief Judge Laura Stevenson and Judge Pro Tem Jonathan Grenade.
Y'all stand. I want to thank you for your service. Y'all are doing a wonderful job. I've heard wonderful things about what you're doing, and not just from citizens, but from attorneys and from police. And thank you. You're willing to serve another term? All right. Well, again, thank you for your service. You're doing an excellent job, and we're very proud of you. So how about giving these judges a hand, because they do a great job. Yeah. You want to come up and let's do a picture?
Yeah.
I'd like to have a picture with the judges. All right, real quick. Thank you, Brad and Michael.
Oh, no, go ahead. Oh, okay.
Throw the book out.
You show Judge Laura.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, we'll do the consent agenda now. All right. Wait, do we have a quorum? Wait. All right, go ahead. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of approving the consent agenda, signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right.
We have no announcements. The
Okay.
next item would be reports and presentations. We have commendations from the Police Department, Chief Andura.
If I could have, Mayor and Council, if I could have Officer Nelson Burgos, Officer Parks McIntosh, and Officer Howard Miller come forward. Mayor and Council, on January 16th of this year at 10:35 PM, these officers responded to an apartment fire at Marquis Terrace Apartments off of Buford Highway. I know everyone, a lot of press was given to the fire department. However, these officers actually arrived there before the fire department because, as you know, they have to change clothes and dress up, get out of their pajamas.
Right.
But they were actually there. Each one of the officers took a different part of the building, entered the whole building, tried knocking on doors. If they couldn't get anyone to answer the door, they were actually kicking in doors. So we don't know how many people they saved, but they deserve a lot of credit for the initiation they took. And they only left the building when the roof started collapsing. So we want to give kudos to these officers for the great job that they did.
You have some more?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Got three more.
Next, if I could have Suzanne Rice come up. This took place on the night of New Year's Eve, actually New Year's Day, the morning of. Suzanne, when everyone else was partying, Suzanne was busy in the police department working. She's one of our public service representatives. Suzanne was sitting at the window to take reports, bond money, or answer any questions for anyone that comes into the police department at that time. She happened to see a male near the front door of the police building. He appeared at the front door, then he disappeared. She saw him going towards the back of the building. Well, she immediately started viewing the cameras that we have set up at the department. She actually saw him enter a police car. He was going to take some things out of the police car or whatever. She contacted our officers right away, and he was arrested for breaking into one of the police cars behind our station. So with that, a lot of people wouldn't have followed through like she did, but Suzanne deserves a lot of credit for that, too.
Thank you.
And next, on January 15th, I'd like Officer Garvin LaCroix, Officer David Fikes, and our four-legged officer, K-9 Dano. If he's in here yet. He's coming up, he's in the car because he gets a little anxious when he's too many people around. We'll give him a minute to come up. But basically what happened on this was there was a serious robbery assault where a person was beat up pretty bad in the area of Buford Highway in North Valley near one of the apartments. This took place on January 15th, about 8:30 at night. Officer LaCroix handled the original call. Officer Fikes happened to be in the area with his canine, immediately picked up a trail. They went through the woods, and we had a number of these similar type robberies where we believe these people were involved with probably eight robberies similar to this. Dana was able to pick up a track. They followed him to, I think it was an abandoned building. They found three people inside. It was three people who actually committed the robbery. They actually located all the property on one of the persons, and all three of them were arrested for the robbery and assault.
All right.
And one of the things we want to do, Officer Fikes, we want to give him credit because if you remember when one of our canine officers was bit by the Yellow Jackets along with the dog, I probably received 300 calls about how's the dog and nothing about how the officer was. So to give David a little more credit, yesterday he was in the area of was at Burton Plaza. He was just checking on two guys about, I don't know, what time was that, David? 8:30. 8:30 at night, and one of them threw a packet in. It looked like a drug deal that was going down. David, without Dano, actually recovered 28 grams of crystal meth and charged the guy with trafficking drugs. So we give him credit for that. But all these gentlemen deserve credit.
Which was which? Got any more?
That's it. Picture time, I
We
guess.
could get, yeah, how could we get one big group shot? What do you think?
Yeah, that's what they usually
Is
do.
that possible?
We need to be back here. We got so many.
Better to do it back there.
Yeah.
No. Oh, I know. He texts at 7:15 that he's on his way. I know, I gotta tell Brad to have it moved. I know it.
So it might be
Yes, I agree. What did you say about thing about Facebook? I love our doggy. Oh, yeah, tell me. Okay.
No. All right, everybody.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you again to all of our officers that serve the city and protect our citizens, so thank you all so much. And thank you to Chief and Marie and Rick for putting together such a great force. Every day, we're just so proud of y'all. Chief Yandura, you've got another presentation?
Yes, sir. Basically, you should have all the statistics in front of you. Okay, we'll pull it up. What I did was mainly geared the information towards DUIs. From the last meeting where I provided statistics, that was September 23rd, and we went up until February 8th.
I'm noticing on this, it's got a new deputy chief of police up there on the letterhead.
Well, it's not official yet, but
All right.
it made a letterhead. He's actually in leadership and management school at the FBI Academy.
All right. Go ahead.
And let the cat out of the bag there.
Well, it's right
Jim.
there on the paper.
But basically, what I did was, we broke it down, and actually, this report was actually prepared by our new crime analyst, Kathy Eskew, who's been a great asset to us. I'd just like to give her kudos today, too. She did a bunch of research. We had an armed robbery at a Chevron station in the newly annexed area on North Druid Hills. It took place in January. She did a bunch of work. We got some videos. She actually, through her work, she was able to identify the same person probably involved in the Wells Fargo bank robbery in the Lilburn, another gas station in DeKalb County on Claremont, as well as ours. This morning at 7 o'clock, one of our detectives went with Lilburn Police to the guy's house through information that she was able to come up with. He admitted all 3 robberies.
Wow.
And we cleared up the bank robbery and as well as the other 2 gas station robberies, so. But she prepared this report, pulling all the statistics that we had. The main thing that we were gearing towards was the, on the first page, here you have arrest, accidents, and incidents. Out of the incidents, well, on the next page, it actually explains our DUIs. We've had 54 DUI arrests from September 23rd until February 8th. Out of those 54 DUI arrests, 27 of them took place from 2 o'clock till 6 o'clock in the morning during that time. And then I even broke it down further, and it's not on here, but 7 of the arrests took place between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. 7 of them took place between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. 4 of them took place between 4 and 5, and 2 took place between 5 and 6. And a lot of those were serious. We had a lot of hit-and-run accidents during that time. This chart actually shows the breakdown of crimes that we handled during that time. If you remember last time I showed the video of the gang fight that we had in that area, since that time we've had a number of armed robberies. A person that was slashed pretty good in one of the parking lots, one of the bars at 4 o'clock in the morning. We made an arrest on that. We had an officer, I'm just picking out some of the unusual ones that we had. We did have an officer that was actually taking a DUI report. It was a drunk that basically hit a pole and totaled out his car. He was standing behind the vehicle waiting for a tow truck to come, protecting the scene, when our officer was actually rear-ended, causing severe damage to the police car by another drunk. So that took place about 4 o'clock in the morning. We had another officer rear-ended at Buford in Corporate. That took place at 3:10 in the morning. And as recently as 3 days ago, at 3:10 in the morning, we stopped the car. Driver received a traffic citation. We don't know what the passenger was on, but he got up and started fighting with 2 of the officers. They had to call another 2 officers in. They ended up with pepper spray. We ended up with a damaged car on that one, and that person had to go to jail for resisting and disorderly conduct and assault. So it just keeps on going on, a lot of the statistics that we have. I actually have a breakdown, but it's too voluminous to put on the charts here. But if anyone needs any further information, I could pull it up.
Chief, I had a question for you. It's great data. I'd love to publish this stuff on our website just so that citizens could see this kind of great crime fighting that you're doing out there on the streets. One of the things that I would love to see is an ongoing trend. You know, this looks like a quarterly report from September to February, so it's the last quarter, I guess, of data. I'd love to see, you know, I know that we had an initial spike of calls going up when we started the service, but, you know, to have a yearly trend or quarter-over-quarter trend line.
Actually, that's easy to pull, Councilman, because what we do is we have to report every year to the FBI.
Yeah.
Our UCR statistics come out. We're so new, we didn't have anything last year to
Right.
fill a whole report, and they're always a year behind. So we're actually starting to compare some of the information we have now.
Yeah.
There's been spikes in certain crimes, and on the other hand, there's been decreases, and some of them are a result of the officers actually doing a good job. We arrested a gang member from SIR 13 about 2 weeks ago, and if you remember, we had an increase in graffiti that was popping up all over the south end of town.
Right.
And since he's been in jail, all our graffiti stopped, so.
All right.
Abandoned.
Alpharetta arrested somebody for breaking into cars, and we actually linked him. We think he was involved with a lot of ours in Dunwoody's and Sandy Springs. Since he's been locked up with Alpharetta's charges, we haven't had any more car break-ins like we were getting.
Yeah.
So it still follows the same pattern where probably 5 or 8% of our population or the criminals actually cause 95% of the crime.
Right. Do you think that we're starting to make a trend line in decreasing amount of crime in Brookhaven?
I think we are. I mean, one instance is we have Drew Valley Homeowners Association, their neighborhood meeting we usually attend. And we could tell from that, when they have issues in their neighborhood, and that's probably one of the biggest neighborhoods that has meetings, we end up with monthly meetings. Well, we very seldom get called to quarterly meetings. We just had one about 2 weeks ago, and they had nothing to report. They had no burglaries for the past 3 months, which is a good thing.
Oh.
So they're very happy.
Chief, in your narrative, in your report, you make several observations and tie these statistics to the late closing hours. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Well, we talked about it before, but, all the other cities around us, with the exception of DeKalb and Chamblee, and I think Chamblee's kind of waiting to follow our lead to see what we're doing, because that's what they've been doing in the past. They all closed on at 2:30. With the exception of DeKalb and Chamblee right now. And it seems, well, just from the DUIs that we have, and we have a lot of hit and runs, and a lot of those hit and runs are a result of the people that, probably being drunk while they're driving, and they take off. That's because they're leaving the other locations coming in our town. And it's all over town. It's not only on Buford Highway where we have the majority of the alcohol establishments, but we're stopping the cars because they're leaving that area at 3 or 4 in the morning. That's why some of the arrests happen between 3, 4, and 4 and 5, and 5 and 6, actually. So I think just late night hours, hurt us as far as a lot of activity during that time.
Of course, I guess we amended our hours, and it'll go into effect this summer, is that correct? June?
June, I believe, at 3:30, yeah.
So, I mean, it looks like at least a good portion of these, if half of them, you're saying, well, 42% is related to bars in the city, and the 400 to 500 time and the 5 to 6, and maybe in the 3 to 4 time would be, you might see significant drops if these are related to the bars, if they're closed, because we're closing our bars earlier than what the chart is here.
Right.
So it would seem like once we get that, we can pretty well assess
what's happening.
The real relationship is, and see, how the hours are affecting, because you got some, looks like the greatest period of arrests is from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And right now our bars close at 4 o'clock, is that right?
It depends on what day. Sometimes the closing hours vary from the stop serving hours, so some days they're allowed to stay open till 5.
Right. So that's looks like the greatest instance of arrest is that 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock time frame. What's the difference in an incident and an arrest?
An incident, generally, that could be anything from domestic, where there's no physical abuse or anything, to noise complaints, to checking out panhandling or things like that, disorderly conduct.
And can you expand this? Could we see a 24-hour chart, just like this, not just for 2 to 600, but for all the entire?
Sure. We actually pulled all the statistics. The only one I really did was for the DUIs. As I mentioned, during this time period, it was 54 DUIs, and 27 of them happened during this time period.
So the remainder.
We could pull the rest of those, too.
Just kind of with a chart just like this, showing all that, like a 24-hour clock.
Sure, I could give that to the city manager.
Okay.
The DUIs are the most serious in my mind. So in the future, could you put that as one of the identifications?
Sure.
and we'll have consistency. Now, it's a valid point that you brought up about some of these could be coming from not within the city of Brookhaven, but from neighboring cities that also have late-night hours. Do you share this type of information, like with Chamblee and/or Doraville,
Or unincorporated DeKalb, or just
or
DeKalb?
unincorporated DeKalb? Yeah.
We talk, as a matter of fact, we have a DeKalb Chiefs meeting tomorrow at our police station, so I'll share it with them then.
Is that a first, or is that a regular event?
The meetings take place once a month and at different locations. Just so happens tomorrow is our time.
Okay, I'm sure that those police stations would have already had the responsibility of submitting that report to the FBI that you were alluding to earlier, even though we were a first-time city. So it'd be
They should have.
interesting to see what's happening just down the road compared to what we see going on here. I'd be interested in seeing that.
Okay. The DUIs, the FBI reports are just for Part 1 crimes, Part 2 crimes, which are the more serious ones.
Which is the DUI and what else?
It's not DUIs, it's for murders, burglaries.
I got you.
Rapes and things like that.
Okay, well, I'm sure they have records of DUIs and,
Yeah, we
Hit
can
and
pull that
runs
from the
and-
Governor's Office of Highway Safety.
right?
We belong to that group, too.
So in the total pie, on the, it's 2 to 600, these are all the crimes, or y'all didn't report any of the more serious crimes? Like the ones you were just talking about, the type 2 or the,
Yeah, these are mainly the Part 1 crimes.
but do we have records of other ones?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We could pull up by time of day, by day of week, by area,
Type of crime?
yeah, type of crime, the offense, and everything.
All right.
I just want to make sure that we're keeping this information in front of us, because we did ask the chief to come back and report periodically,
Right.
specifically as it relates to criminal activity and problems caused by the late hours, the late closing hours of our clubs. I continue to find these stats very troubling, and I think if you read the narrative, you'll see that the chief makes a point of saying that we're not being able to do the proactive policing and business checks that he would like his officers to do, because they're so consumed with the incidents that happen during closing hours. If you read the last paragraph on the narrative, I think his crime analyst is also pointing out that extended bar hours increase problems such as high consumption of alcohol, drunk driving, alcohol-related crime, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I won't belabor this, we've talked about it, but I just want to keep this issue in front of us. I think we haven't gone far enough, and I'd like to continue to support the chief and his recommendation of the 2:30 closing time.
Do you think we should move up the threshold, the date by which our newer hours are implemented?
Give us a better starting point to start comparing things. I'll give you just an example of last night. This is last night's shift, and all we do is list the important cases that they had. And there's only 7 cases listed, and I won't read each one, but first one was trafficking meth. That's the one I just mentioned with the canine, 28 grams of crystal meth. An officer made arrest possession of a firearm by a convicted felon on a traffic stop, driving without headlights during the early morning. We had another one, a wanted person at 2800 block of Claremont Road. We had reckless driving and fleeing and eluding on Buford Highway in Briarwood, and in another possession of meth at Osborne and Peachtree. So it's not just located in this area, but it's throughout the city, and it mainly leads from this area to that area.
Mm-hmm. From which area to that area? From Buford Highway, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and so, we've been through this 100 times, but our present hours, some places can stay open till 5, and some places stay open to 4.
Right,
depending on when.
in our city, yes.
All right. And our new hours are going to be 7 days a week, the same, correct?
3:30 out the
Pretty
door.
close, out the door, 2:55, 3:25, is that right?
Right.
Okay, so, well,
Sundays is earlier, I thought.
Sundays, it had to be, yeah, there
it's
was
a
a,
state
yeah, it's a
law.
state law.
12:30 or something on Sunday.
the opening time is different on Sunday.
Opening time's different, and I believe the closing
I think-
time's a little bit different, I
I think it's
thought.
2:55.
Maybe it's Saturday night.
I think it's 2:50, Saturday night's it's the same, I'm pretty certain it's 2:55.
Right, I'll have to check.
Yeah,
Yeah, because we wanted.
yeah, it's uniform every week, every day.
But I do like your idea of moving up the start date on that.
I mean, it's,
The only thing I'd like to point out on this is that I want us to focus on the root issue of our police response time. So that's the issue that we're trying to solve, making sure that our officers are available to respond to calls for service. If you look through I think J-Max brings up a good point about the 24-hour period, because if you look through the data here, we're looking at 20,000 calls for service, 9,000 of those are night shifts, so that's the 12-hour. So 50% are at nighttime, just about the same as the daytime. Then we're looking at the problem hours of just this window from the 4-hour window from 0200 to 0600, and we've got 22% of the calls at that period of time. Well, that's a quarter of that nighttime call volume. So it's basically the same for each one of those nighttime quarterly sections. So,
But I think what you have to do is you have to look at what types of calls they are.
right,
Like the ones I just mentioned, will take an officer out of circulation for a minimum of 2 hours.
right. And so I think
Whereas
that-
daytime ones are usually burglar alarms where 10 or 15 minutes they're done with the call.
right. And that's I think that's the data that would be very helpful is, yeah, I understand you probably know all these issues, but when we're looking at this data, it's,
If we could just
It's
get the next time,
difficult
the whole picture, then we can focus on that time period, just so we can see all the data. So then we can ask you questions about it from that point, just so we can,
Yeah.
Okay.
rather than keeping it to a specific time period, just have that and everything.
And this is work in progress, so we're trying to address it and see how the decisions that we've made are working out. So some of this information we've already discussed. This goes back to September.
Right.
And we've addressed some of the issues that are coming up in this post-September. And I'd like to see this on a monthly basis, what a month is, so we can see what's going on, because things are going to be changing soon. And we want to be able to monitor that and see what's going on.
I think you hit the nail on the head, though, with the issue, one of the key issues being the length of time of these hours for that officer being out of service. Because that's what your real problem here is that because of the type of crimes between these hours of 2 and 6, your officers are having to deal with maybe a run to the jail, or, they can't respond because they're tied up in having to arrest those people.
Right.
If there's a way to add that segment so that we could see, that this officer is out of service at, a greater period of time.
Each one's going to vary on that so much, it's going to be hard to collect that information.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example today with the armed robbery that was cleared up today. That officer went to Lilburn at 7 this morning. By the time the search warrants were done, he was still leaving the house at 5 o'clock this afternoon.
Yeah, no, that's tough. When you've only got 9 officers on call at that shift, I know, so. Anyway, it's great data. It's good data.
Last thing I'm going to say is, most of the activity, or majority of it, I think, would take place along Beaufort Highway. Is that a fair statement? Okay,
Right.
and that's primarily my district. That does have a reputation for being an entertainment zone. So part of my direction has always been to respect that for what it is and allow that not to be unduly disturbed. But I'm not prepared to do that at the expense of having this become a Cheshire Bridge Road. And I don't mean that, maybe I should pull that statement back.
No, that's fine. No.
I mean, no, Cheshire Bridge Road I don't want it to become what happened in Buckhead when they had to change the whole venue in Buckhead because the situation turned extremely negative. So to really assist in doing this and be able to make good decisions, because it's going to affect people, it's going to affect businesses, but we have a responsibility. Base was right on the mark. We want to make sure that our officers are available response time, and we want to make sure that we're balancing out what is in the area as far as the amenities. So if we could see this on a monthly basis, 24 hours as the mayor was suggesting, as much depth as you can get into this, reasonable. I mean, blocking it together like this as an aggregate, I don't think really helps me make a conclusion of what's going on now versus what was going on in September, for example. Has there been a change? Has there been an improvement? And then as time changes and we make changes, I want to be able to measure that and say, okay, it has a measurable difference one way or the other. Maybe it doesn't have a measurable distance and we need to take more stringent action.
Councilman, how about if we do it for 2 months, and that way we could actually compare 2 months of this year probably to the 2 months of last year?
Fine, you get the gist of what I'm asking for.
Yeah.
You come back with what you think is the best way to do that, but just help us get really good information that's we can be objective about.
Yeah, because I'd be interested to see what happens from 100 to 0200 as well. You know, just before the 19 arrests, is it like 2 arrests or is it 17 or 18? I mean, so extrapolating out, depending on what the data shows, I mean, you could say, if you want to connect this all to out bar closing times, well, I mean, maybe if we closed all bars at 11 o'clock, it might eliminate everything. You know, I don't know. It's where do you stop? Got to make sure we, so if we have the more data, we'll be able to logically make some decisions. All right. Thank you, Chief, for the great information and for your work. We're catching that guy over on Stratfield. So he broke it and burglarized somebody's house on Stratfield, and y'all caught him on Windsor Parkway. Was he on his way to do another job, or was he just?
Yeah, and that was thanks to residents in the neighborhood that actually saw somebody going through yards, and he was peering through somebody's window.
Oh, so he wasn't in the car?
No,
So he
was on his way to MARTA station.
oh, did he have a bag of stuff?
Yeah, he had property from the burglary on Stratford in his pocket still,
Wow.
so,
So that was a suspicious person call.
right. And that's why we're promoting with all the neighborhoods, please call us, and if you see anyone
911.
doesn't,
You
right,
call 911 for a suspicious person, right.
right.
People that's one fear that people have is they think if they're calling 911, if their life isn't imminently in danger. If you call 911 when you see something that doesn't look right, it documents for the police what happened on this day and date. They're not using it in a subsequent investigation. B, it leads to stuff like what Chief just talked about, arresting a guy who was going through yards and had just burglarized a house. So call 911 for suspicious persons as well, not because you can't use your phone or something, or get your door open.
Couldn't use your phone, you wouldn't call 911.
Or for taxi service.
Let me ask you a quick question. At what point do you all notify or put out an alert to a neighborhood that you're chasing a bad guy in their neighborhood or something?
If we think there's a danger involved with the neighborhood, we'll put out an alert through Twitter or whatever.
Next door.
So there was
Right, next
somebody, apparently you all were pursuing in my neighborhood recently, and my phone started ringing off the hook, and I.
But that was happening so quickly.
Yeah.
He was out of the area, I think, by the time
Right, but police were swarming, and the dogs were there.
we had canines
and,
out and everything, yes.
Yeah.
When are you going to ask us for drones? Is that next? Oh. All right. DUI stats done. All right. Thank you, Chief. Tree City USA designations, Kay
Right.
Ivanovich.
Well, as your city arborist, I'm going to take a quick trip down memory lane, and I will make it brief. But I remember, back when I was a child in Augusta, Georgia, the 3 subdivisions we lived in back then had no trees. None. There was no tree protection ordinance in Augusta at that time. We moved up to DeKalb County in Georgia, and at that time, there really was no tree ordinance either. Every place there were new houses, there were no trees. From there, I was really happy as I got into the work world and as I got older, and was ecstatic to see developers required to plant 4 one-inch trees, sticks, in the front yards of every lot. That was the requirement. Today, in Brookhaven, Georgia, I am pleased as punch to announce that we applied for and were awarded a Tree City USA to become a Tree City USA city. This is a program, a national program, that provides a framework for community forestry management for cities and towns across America. Basically, there are standards for sound urban forestry management that have to be met. There are 4 of them: maintaining a tree department, having community tree ordinance, spending at least $2 per capita on urban forestry, and celebrating Arbor Day. After crunching the numbers from 2014, we realized we have $5 per capita. So I applied, and the state forester, Susan Granberry, for the Georgia Forestry Commission, reviewed our application and said that yes, we were approved as a tree city. So from here on out, as the arborist, I'm We will officially receive our award at the Georgian Urban Forestry Council's first quarterly program and the 2015 State Arbor Day event on Wednesday, February 18th at Wesleyan College in Macon. I would like to thank the mayor, city council members, city staff, all of our citizens, patrons of the city of Brookhaven for the commitment we've all made to keep improving our urban forest. I think together we can grow this city into the future, and that's what I'm planning to be a part of. So I just wanted to make that announcement.
Thank you.
Excellent.
All right.
All right, following, we have a proclamation in celebration of Arbor Day.
Here it is. We supposed to read it?
Mhm.
You want to read it?
No, sir, you have that on it.
Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, J. Max Davis, Mayor of the City of Brookhaven, Georgia, do hereby proclaim April 25th, 2014 as Arbor Day in the City of Brookhaven, Georgia, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations, dated this 25th day of April. Well,
Yeah,
this-
that was last year's proclamation that
Okay.
had to be in the packet.
Okay.
And this year, we will read that same proclamation, or only dated currently, for February 20th at our celebration for Arbor Day
On
at
it.
Blackburn 2.
Okay, what day is that going to be, the 25th? All right,
20th of
20th?
February, which is Georgia Arbor Day,
well, this is, okay.
at
All right.
1 o'clock.
All right, so we're going to plant some trees that day, too?
We're going to plant one tree, and then we'll be giving away 100 seedlings
Mm-hmm.
to folks, sawtooth oaks, 50 of those, and 50 red buds
Where do we plant the tree?
at Blackburn 2, at the park.
Oh, what kind of tree? Do we know yet?
Probably is going to be an oak, I would think, because we've got enough understories out there.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you.
Just today, I went by Blackburn 2, where just today, we finished planting 5, the last of the cherry trees that are part of our about 240-some cherry trees that we planted throughout the city. And we had saved a few to try to put out our gateways and along the roads. And we ended up with, we realized that we had kind of neglected Blackburn 2, and they had lost some trees in their effort to transplant and save some. So it actually was a great thing that we were able to plant these trees. And they just built a beautiful gazebo there, so now they kind of frame the gazebo, and I think it's going to be, since they're going to be right next door to where the Cherry Blossom Festival is, and the little ladies do Tai Chi out there all the time and walk around, I think it's going to be great. The other thing that Kay has been just so helpful on the Cherry Tree Project, we also gifted the folks at One Brookhaven some cherry trees in the front because we were anxious to put more cherry trees along Peachtree. But the right-of-ways are kind of restricted there, and it just turned out that this condominium right there, it's right across from Cherokee Plaza, was having to take out their existing landscape because it was running into the folks at Georgia Power who don't like trees on their lines, and they were replanting. And so now we've got some other beautiful cherries front and center right as you come into the city of Brookhaven.
All right.
And all thanks to Kate for helping to expedite all those efforts.
All right. We are at number 5. Thank you, Kay.
Yes, this is our audit report from Malden and Jenkins, who are our CPAs for the city, along with Rob Logan, and Adam Fraley with Malden Jenkins is here to just review the 2013 audit.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us here this evening. My name is Adam Fraley with Malden and Jenkins. This is James Bentz. This is the engagement manager on the job for the city's first ever and fiscal year ended December 31st, 2013 audit. This right here is our annual audit agenda, is what we call this. This is what I'm going to present from. It kind of summarizes the results of the audit, things indicated, and the results and findings of the audit. You should also have in your packets the financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2013, which tells all the financial information of the general fund, of course, the main operating fund of the city, as well as others. In the annual audit agenda, again, just going to touch on some of the highlights through here. If you got any questions or anything that you'd like a little more information on, please stop me, ask those. I'll try to answer those as best I can. Malden and Jenkins is a firm. It's a firm a regional firm in the southeast for which we have our specialty niche is governmental governmental organizations. We service about 65,000 hours of service to governments on an annual basis, comprising of about 250 state and local governments within the southeast. The City of Brookhaven's audit for the year ended December 31st, 2013 included, of course, the financial statements that we were charged with the responsibility of rendering opinion as to their fair presentation. The financial statements are the responsibilities of the city. The city's finance department puts together an annual report in accordance with state law, and it is due to the state of Georgia within 6 months of its year end. In doing our audit, we follow certain auditing standards, and we make sure that those financial statements are reported in accordance with Juris accepted accounting principles. We did render our opinion. It is often called a clean opinion, which is an unmodified audit report. That means that we believe, based on our test work, that the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects as of and for the year ended December 31st, 2013. Just a little bit of the highlights of the financial information. Again, the general fund is the main operating fund of the city. For the year ended December 31st, 2013, the general fund had a fund balance and an increase also in fund balance of about $434,000. Total general fund revenues and expenditures were roughly $12.6 million and $15.8 million, respectively. As part of our audit, we also issued a compliance report in accordance with government auditing standards. As part of those requirements, we have to have certain required communications, which are included in this annual audit agenda and was delivered to management during our audit. Included in those required communications was the fact that we had some audit adjustments during our audit. Those were delivered to management. They were posted to the records of the general ledger records of the city, and they were also posted to those financial statements that you have, again, to make sure that they're fairly presented. We did have some findings as a result of the audit. They're included in the back of the financial report and behind this audit opinion in accordance with government auditing standards. Those findings were discussed with management. Corrective actions were taken and delivered to the state in accordance with that requirement. There were also what we call management letter comments, which are less significant than what the standards require us to cite as a finding, but are things where maybe we feel like maybe the internal controls could be tweaked here or there to make things, a little more streamlined or move more efficiently or effectively. Those are also included in the document. Also in our annual audit agenda, and this is where the reading gets fun, but we've got a lot of information on new accounting standards that are coming out. So you can look at this document, and you can see that, see new accounting standards are coming out, and as you're making decisions on financial transactions and what have you, how those may impact the financial statements in years going forward. So that information is in there as well. And that concludes my presentation, if you've got any questions.
Yeah, I had just a few quick questions.
Okay.
You mentioned in your statements there's a $434,000 increase, I think, in, that was one of your first points that you mentioned. I think that was a cash balance increase, fund balance?
I mentioned fund balance.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what that number was. I
Well-
think it was something about fund, an overall cash balances. And if that's the case, how much of that was due to just increases in property values, valuation, market value?
Well-
Do you break that down in the finances at all, or is it?
Well, what I was saying is the 434,000, it's not necessarily cash. I mean, cash and fund balance is kind of the general fund's reserve. It's the
it's your
equity that's
accrual.
built up. Well, it's
Okay.
not the accrual, it's the equity, it's the assets minus the liability. So all the assets minus those liabilities.
It's your retained
is-
earnings function of it? Yeah.
Right, in the private world, it's called retained earnings, but accounting's a little different for governments. We call it fund balance.
All right.
And it was 434,000. The cash position at year end for the general fund was about 60,000. For the government as a whole, though, because you did have your host fund and some of these other non-major funds, cash as a whole was about 3.7 million
Okay.
at December 31st, 2013.
Right.
But as far as, taxes and the property taxes themselves for the year was 5.7 million. And so that was included in your 12.5 million of total revenues for the general fund. 5.7 million of it was due to property taxes.
That's good, and 2013 was not even a full year of revenue for the city. 2014 is when we really got into we're going to pick up all the
And on those
revenues
new
from all of our different sources.
That's
Well, reading
right.
through the report, I had one other question I saw that was pretty far down into the statements, and it just, it had to do with the fact that governments are required to have security, to collateralize its funds or its cash balances. Am I understanding that correct? That we're required to have sort of treasuries on our things?
Pledged for your deposits, that's right.
So FDIC doesn't qualify for that, or?
Well,
does it?
FDIC does qualify. You can, certain accounts have FDIC coverage. Some,
Just our
like
cash.
certain money markets, stuff like that aren't FDIC. But FDIC is only up to, what, 250,000?
Right.
And so the deposit, granted, y'all had deposits of about 3.7 million. That excess has got to be collateralized by the banks. And
So it's something you pointed out that we need to have our finance department look at to.
make
to-
sure that
to
you're always
do-
have
to be
this.
in
It's
compliance.
actually state law. That's
Yeah.
right.
Right. What do governments usually hold for that? Short-term T-notes?
Well, the
is
governments
that-
actually don't hold them. It's the banks.
Oh, the
It's
banks are
the bank
required
that's
to
pledging,
Oh.
it's holding those investments and pledging them to basically be able to pay back your deposits and should they fail. or
Oh, okay.
What
So
have you.
it's just the amounts in excess of the FDIC, anything
Right.
that's
You just-
insured.
As a city and as a finance department, you just have to kind of hold the bank's feet to the fire on
Yeah.
that, and usually it's done contractually.
That's interesting. Good to know. We're required to be ultra-safe. Hopefully those banks don't fail.
That's true.
That was all the questions I had.
Okay.
Do y'all, well, one more, last question. Any, and this might be for city staff, do we know when 2014 we will have an audited statement on that?
We're getting ready for that right now. I think we're looking at March, April now, April.
April for completion or April for start?
Start.
And
I
how
think
long does it
that-
usually take?
Well, this one shouldn't take as long as the
Absolutely.
first one.
I mean, state of Georgia allows 6 months after year end. By state law, a government is supposed to have their audited financial statements turned into the Department of Audits at the state of Georgia within 6 months of their year end. So that would be obviously June, June 30th. And the idea is to have the audit field work conducted during April and have it done prior to that June 30th deadline, which should not be a problem.
Great.
Anybody else? I want to give us a minute to.
It is a really exciting, it's a great report. I enjoyed reading it. Good stuff. And I really will enjoy reading the 2014 audit.
You're right. I mean, more revenue streams are going to be coming on in that 2014 report.
Yeah, and it seems like, with some of the budget issues that you referenced, we didn't really have accurate budgeting in that first year. And so, I think as we get more, we can normalize our operations, I think we'll see better audited statements, not from y'all's perspective, but from the city's operations. This is exciting stuff. I'm hoping that some of my other council members weigh in on the finances.
Trying to digest.
You weren't this excited about your 1949 zoning book that you're reading.
Citizens Guide to Zoning.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us even later, so.
You should have started this out by saying the state of the city is sound.
Yeah.
I apologize. Thanks for having us.
All right, thanks.
All right.
I have some additional information for 2014. We discussed, since it had been such a long time since 2013, that we would just sort of give you some updated information.
All right, good.
I know that when Bates and I met several weeks ago, one of the issues that we discussed was the cash position of the city at the end of 2014. And since then, the staff has reconciled the cash accounts. And you'll be excited to know that at the end of 2014, the general fund, after you paid off your TAN, was $3,186,841. So that's pretty good.
That's just in the general.
That's just the general fund. And in your host fund, you have $7,467,675. So that's outstanding. $7 million.
Wow. So 10 million something on
10 and a half, yeah.
That's
I mean, for your first, 2014, that's great.
Those
So-
banks need to collateralize
So I thought you'd like
a
to hear
lot.
that.
Yeah,
So-
thank you.
So that's where you stand as of 12/31/2014. Hopefully, and Carl and his staff will be working on this, but hopefully for 2016, you won't have to get a TAN. But this year, when we analyze the ending cash positions and some of the issues that we had coming up, as far as the timing of things, it looked like you were going to need a TAN for 2015. So hopefully for 2016, you won't need that. So that's also very good news.
So that's, that host figure is a little more than we thought it was going to be again. So we were thinking 6 point something, 6.3.
That was the revenue, correct.
And the host is now,
7.4, and that's cash.
that's $1.1 million more than we thought, 1.1 million more.
What is that left over from last year? So carryover from last
Carry
year.
carry forward,
It's not
correct.
new money.
That's correct,
It isn't? It is?
That's including the carryover.
including the carry.
Right.
Yes.
All right.
I know you're looking at historical information when you put this together, but do you have conversations about what's coming down the pike, like potential change in host?
Yes, and we have talked about that, because there are some changes that could affect all of Georgia, potentially, with the changes that are proposed for hosts, as well as the changes for sales tax on fuel. So, I mean, there's
Yeah,
several things.
we went over the fuel tax. Could you go through a rendition of the potential changes coming up in host now for public purposes?
One thing that's been discussed, and the way it was proposed, if any county in Georgia currently has the local option sales tax, they can convert to host. And the way that's structured, that kind of leaves the cities out. So, you don't have a seat at the table. Where lost, you do. And the city of Brookhaven is unique in that you get an allocation of the host, because that's not always the case for all the cities. I think you know some of the issues in DeKalb County in the past with the cities and DeKalb. So that's what's been looked at currently. But of course, it hasn't been passed yet. So that is what's possible. Forward.
To put it in perspective for the citizens, I think it's, when you look at the audited statements, that host revenue was a quarter of our revenue for
Absolutely.
2013. So
Without that,
yeah, I mean, if that disappears, or if that's, if we get a big hit on host, while things are looking bright and rosy right now, that is very much in play with the task force recommendations at DeKalb County, and so, I think that it's something that we need to be, we need to have a seat at the table, or certainly be involved, get our citizens involved in that, because that's a significant revenue portion for this city, and potentially,
The
if
re-
there's not an alternative, the money's going to have to come up from somewhere.
The reason I asked that question was this message needs to be talked about, and it needs to be understood that there are changes coming, and they could have, Bates just well pointed out, very significant impacts
That's correct.
on this city, what happens to down the road and how we have to structure ourselves. We need to be anticipating this. I think from a budgetary, we talked about this before, Marie. We need to be anticipating this and how we budget out, so we're not overextending ourselves and kind of like getting ready for it, should it come. But there's another consideration, too, is that you've just talked about what may be pending legislation-wise, but if a new city is to come about, which there is the potential
That's right.
that a city of La Vista Hills and/or Tucker, Tucker probably has a high chance, La Vista Hills, I'm not sure, we'll have to wait and see. But if both of those come out, that's going to impact our host also,
Right.
and significantly,
We talked about that this past summer
right?
at our retreat.
So, I mean, I think the handwriting's on the wall, and let's not be afraid to talk about it. We need to talk about it, but there are changes coming, and I think it behooves us to make sure that we're taking the right steps to prepare for this and not say, oops, what happened? And then have to go back to our citizenry and have it be a bad situation, have a bad conversation.
But I will say this, one of the things that concerned all of us, when we were thinking about incorporation, then we finally incorporated and began operations, the biggest concern we all had was finances. Could we afford to run the city? Could we have enough police? Could we have money for parks or paving or sidewalks? And I think that question's been answered resoundingly yes, and it's a great relief, because you never know. You just don't, you think and you hope and you study and you plan for it, but, so thanks to staff and Marie and you and the audit team for kind of confirming that for us, that fear is, for at least for now and for where we are and what we can see, if we do things the right way, is unfounded and can be dispensed with.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just want to add, though, I think it speaks to the fact that we need to stick with what I believe are our core values when we became a city, which is to be very frugal and to be just the best stewards of the taxpayers'
right.
money as we can, and to, I mean, you all are sitting on chairs that were donated by corporations. I mean, we're cheap around here. We're really cheap. Thank you, Brad.
Brad, yes. Thank
And I think we'll continue to operate, I mean, that's part of our ethic around here, is that we try to carefully deliberate the expenses. We try not, to be extravagant, and I think we just have to keep holding that course as well and being true to those values as well.
Last thing I'd like to just say on this is we've done a good job, I think, as a council in making sure that we get our reserves up.
Right.
And I'm very, very adamant on this, and Marie's been very cooperative and agreeable to this point, is I think we need to be setting a minimum reserve level at whatever our host level is. So in case we hit that default, we have a cushion. Otherwise, we're going to be a city in distress.
And one final point, I think that without the great work of Marie and the city staff, these reserves, and the level of achievement that we've been able to get done with our finances would not have happened without your great expertise and the dedication of your staff. So thanks for all of y'all's hard work and working on a shoestring budget. And I know it seems, as an observer, it seems like this staff is stretched all the time with the amount of work that y'all are having to do. And I know that that's somewhat because, Marie, you're frugal with the budgets and you hold these departments accountable. It's a great sacrifice that the city's made and all the staff and getting us started up and building a strong financial house.
Thank you.
Right. Well, more thank yous.
Thank you. I'll just add that with Carl on board now, and they've implemented the Encode software that we talked about when we did the budget, and they're on track to get everything reported timely. So with the April audit field work coming in this year, it's due June 30th, so they're on track to get everything timely, and Carl and his staff have done an outstanding job getting everything pulled together. So they should be commended.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank people that don't get thanked enough, and that's my council up here. You work for $12,000 a year, 40 hours a week sometimes, And, we talk about the reserves, Joe, and that's our policy.
I'm not giving any more.
That's what we found is important. We need to build up a reserve before we do A, B, C, and D. We got to have a reserve built up. We hired a city manager that was, when we talked to her, we knew that she was frugal. And when in her negotiating, we know that she does that. So I want to thank you all for all the time and work you put in to helping make our city a success, and particularly the finances, because you all do, in their own way, point out things that we could save money on and do better at. So I want to thank you all for your public service and your efforts to make this city financially stable. So thank you all. Okay, next.
We got a good team here.
We have no old business, so we'll move on to new business. Item number 1 is Resolution ID 1686. This is consideration of a resolution for the organization of and creation of a Brookhaven Convention Visitors Bureau. I believe in our work session, we talked about coming back on
Right.
March the 17th with more information, a framework.
Yes, and do we need to still do a public comment, though? I would think that we might need to, do we?
We
Yeah.
can if you'd like.
Yeah, so we're going to likely can maybe defer this, but we'd like to hear from public comment, then we'll take action on the motion. Is there any public comment on this item? Susan? Okay. Is there a motion?
I move that we defer the consideration of the resolution to approve the organization of the
Number 4.
CBB.
Item 4.
Wait, new business item 1, I thought. We're talking new business
Yes.
item number 1, right? To defer the consideration of the ZBB
I'm sorry, you're right.
based on the recommendations given at the work session
Right.
to the March 17th?
17th.
March 17th council meeting.
That date.
I don't think that's right, the 17th.
Yeah, I want to double check that.
Because
it's March 10th.
Please.
It's either
March
10th or
10th.
24th, isn't it?
The 10th.
The 10th.
March
Excuse me.
10th,
Mhm.
2015 meeting.
I second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, number 2.
All right, next item, Resolution 1700, consideration and approval, Resolution House Bill 170, Transportation Funding Act. We had talked about revising the resolution to couch it in a more positive manner with solutions.
Right. And we all have the draft, I think. So we can discuss that. I mean, I think it's, the resolution and the way it was worded to me was a little, could be perceived as a little negative, catty. I don't know how you say it, but it just didn't seem like something we should be sending to our legislators without having considered we talked about not knowing the full impact of the bill, that it's changing daily, but we did talk about possibly asking for an amendment, let them consider an amendment that would, if they're going to move forward with this, then that they would consider having an amendment that any transportation dollars that come out of the city of Brookhaven under this law would be earmarked back to the city of Brookhaven for the city of Brookhaven to make specific transportation improvements and to have that money, that funding managed by the city of Brookhaven. So I think, not all cities do allocate a lot of money towards transportation. A lot of cities have a lot of interstates in their jurisdictions, and I think they do rely on the state quite a bit for just about everything. We get some state funding for transportation, but we obviously, with what we did on Ashford Doherty Road, that's showing that we're know the traffic problems. Our constituents, our citizens talk about it. They're frustrated about it. We sit in it, and I think that we have been very proactive in our short time about addressing traffic issues. We're going to be doing studies this year, soon, initiating studies on bottleneck areas within our city. So I think that we're one of the cities that is getting out front of transportation issues, and while at the same time recognizing that the state has issues and that we don't want to make them worse. So I just think a little bit of autonomy on this would be helpful. So if we're going to send the money off, it should come back for us to do projects in our city.
I have a question, and Carl, maybe you know the answer to this. I'm not sure it's possible for the state to know where the sales tax money originates. especially for motor fuel.
Right. Well, we know that the 8% would be coming from we know that figure would be going to the state, correct?
Well, that's our proportionate share of host, but is that our proportionate, well, I don't know. Carl, what do you think?
According to ACCG, approximately just under 10% of the sales tax collected in DeKalb County is due to sales of motor fuel. They can't specifically tell us which city that is or anything like
Right.
that,
Yeah.
but that's the estimate based on their study.
Right. But we've been told, I guess today, that it would be at roughly 8% of our host funds would.
We believe about 8% of our
Well,
host funds.
but I think you're just extrapolating that if 8% is the total of the motor fuel portion of all the sales tax of host, then that would probably impact 8% of our portion.
Right.
But I don't think I don't think they're counting all of our gas stations and what revenue is generated from here.
The Georgia Department of Revenue has never provided that number. I believe they may probably have the number. I don't know if they have the capacity to provide it to anybody else, but they has never provided that number.
Right, if it could be figured, I think it'd be a good idea to have it send it back to us.
But I think the ACCG just took a good answer. I think it just took a good guess or swipe at it to figure out that ratio.
Yeah, I thought that the State Department of Revenue, and particularly in sales tax, was tracking local jurisdictions and some kind of data point that they have in the receipts.
You would think with all the technology today and the filing of motor fuel sales tax returns with the state, that they would have the capacity to tell which stations are selling gas, whether they're in Brookhaven, DeKalb, Fulton, or any county, and determine the sales.
I know they've got the data. I mean, I know from my personal experiences.
I think
during sales tax.
an easy way to access that is just at the end of the year, take an annual gallonage sales for that station. IRS does an average credit per gallon, because you know what an average price of gallon is going to be over every 6-month period of time. You can apply that into 6-month increments against the total gallonage, and you can come up with a pretty good estimate.
Yeah, and that's what I think ACCG probably did. They got wholesale provision of motor fuel in the metro area determined and came up with some ratio.
Right.
I'm just wondering if that's
That's all
information
they
we
did.
can get from the
Extrapolate.
service stations other in Brookhaven, so we know what that estimate is going to be, and it's going to be a fairly close number, instead of just throwing a dart against the wall.
Well, at the root cause, we need to have an equitable solution for the allocation of these funds. If they're going to come out, if we're talking about removing this $450,000 out of Brookhaven's budget, if this bill were to pass as proposed, we need to, and the county's being, given the opportunity to compensate for that loss in their revenue, we need to have a similar type of avenue or a sharing of that revenue that they're getting. That's the
That's the gist of the resolution. is
Right.
just
Carl, have you heard?
How it can be done.
Have you heard of the potential that instead of doing sales tax at the pump, they'll do a surcharge on the barrel at point of distribution?
I hadn't heard that, and I think one of the things they've tried to do this time is not apply a percentage for sales tax at on what they're talking about charging an excise tax of just 6 cents per gallon.
Right.
And so that, so short of changes in consumption, the
Right.
revenue stream would tend to be stable versus the price of gas or the barrel of oil in the open market fluctuating up and down throughout the years. So they're trying to do something to stabilize the revenues they would collect from the sales of motor fuel by just charging 6 cents per gallon, which is what they're trying to do in the excise tax, and replacing host and other sales tax revenues.
Another point of note in this House Bill 170, the hybrid, the state tax credit for the hybrid cars or the electric vehicles disappears. So if you're looking for an electric vehicle, you got a short window of time to take advantage of that, because it looks like it's going away. But you're exactly right. That's as cars go electric and more fuel efficient, that percentage of the sales tax doesn't work.
And increase MPG?
Thank you, Carl. It's good to hear from you. And enjoy your knowledge base. All right, any more discussion or questions? Is there a motion on number 2?
Did we not make a motion?
We didn't make it yet.
We're deferring this, right?
No,
Ask for any public comment.
Oh, yes.
Is there a public,
Action.
yeah, is there any public comment on this? It's not, yeah, it's a resolution, you're right, so it's not, yeah, it's not a law, it's just a suggestion. Right,
Okay, we just showed it as an action item.
okay.
Yeah, so I approve that I move,
Why don't we read what we,
And it needs to be read
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
the record.
read the ordinance, the resolution.
the resolution.
Just do it quickly.
I move that we approve Resolution 2015-02-01, whereas the Joint Study Committee on Critical Transportation Infrastructure Funding will issue a report aimed at helping the state of Georgia raise additional revenue to address transportation needs, whereas the Joint Study Committee may recommend a reduction to local governments and sales tax collected on the sale of motor fuel taxes for non-transportation purposes. Whereas in 2013, local governments in Georgia collected $516 million in local sales taxes from the sales of motor fuel. Whereas if motor fuel is removed or exempted from local sales taxes, the city of Brookhaven would lose a substantial sum of its host allocation from DeKalb County. Whereas in addition, the property taxpayers in the city of Brookhaven would lose a substantial portion of its host property tax credit. Whereas any suggestion that the city of Brookhaven is not making substantial investments towards the transportation projects would be inaccurate. Sorry, long resolution. Whereas this council urges the Joint Study Committee on Critical Infrastructure Funding and our local delegation to the Georgia General Assembly to craft an amendment to House Bill 170, which would designate that any funds contributed through the funding mechanisms of this proposed law, which originate from the city of Brookhaven are paid to the state of Georgia or its designee, would be specifically earmarked for transportation improvements within the city of Brookhaven. Such improvements would be subject to the approval and management of the city of Brookhaven. Continue?
Yes.
Now, therefore, the City Council of Brookhaven, Georgia hereby resolves, we hereby urge the Joint Study Committee on Critical Infrastructure Funding and our local delegation on the Georgia General Assembly to rework House Bill 170 and to reconsider any recommendation or measure that might reduce allocation of sales tax funding to local governments. Let a copy of this resolution be forwarded to each member of the local delegation to the Georgia General Assembly. So moved.
Is there a second?
Do you,
Please, 1 second.
you want to change the word might to will, or measure that will reduce allocation?
What paragraph is that?
Second to the
Just
last.
say that it has the potential, or, it's a little broad, more broad. This isn't
It still works. It still works.
It's a
This isn't a
resolution.
law, it's just
It still works. Go ahead.
please do something a little different.
Got it.
All right, I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
I think the only point of discussion is that we discussed this in the work session, that this was a request from the Georgia Municipal Association that the cities address a inequity in the motor, in this House bill's proposal, and that the county has a mechanism to recoup some of the monies that the cities would lose, but the cities in the current proposal don't have an ability to recoup these monies. So our revision from the work session to this meeting addressed not the GMA's recommended opposition to the House bill, because we believe, as we discussed in our council work session, that transportation funding is important for the House to consider, for the state of Georgia to pass, but we wanted to be supportive of that bill in a way that was fair to the cities. So that's the reason for the change in the resolution.
Any more discussion? All in favor of the resolution, signify so by saying aye.
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 All opposed? All right. Number 3.
3, ordinance 1701, consideration of an ordinance to amend Article 2 of Chapter 14, Land Development of the Code of the City of Brookhaven. This is the tree ordinance.
Well, we had discussion in the work session.
Correct.
We'll do some more, I guess Kay will present again, or Ben, or
Laura?
just Laura, Laura, I'm sorry.
Again, there were two changes that were made to this, to Section 14-39H. The first was regarding the size of the replacement plan for meeting the specimen criteria, and that was changed to they shall be recompensed on a 1 5/10 times the equivalent inches. In subsection F. Additionally, there was one other change.
Section I.
Can you get to it? And it was the recompense fee, it was the number of inches subject to a recompense fee shall not exceed 50 inches per acre, nor shall it exceed $100,000. And I believe that there was some discussion in the work session regarding this, and changing it to $125,000 in any case.
Is that figure related to, it's per acre, right?
Per acre.
Total, isn't it? Per acre?
Okay, I'm asking staff, we can't call out from the audience, I appreciate it, but I'm asking staff if that, it says per acre in the.
Per acre.
Right, it does, so the number of inches subject to a recompense fee shall not exceed 50 inches per acre, nor shall exceed $100,000 in any case, so. Right. Okay, right. So if it was a 10-acre tract, it'd be $1 million. If it was a 10-acre tract, it'd be $1 million cap? What would it be?
Right.
So on 100 acres, it could still be capped at $100,000.
One of, I think it's important to, it's just an observation I think that the public would be interested in. One, it's certainly a concern that I have when we talk about the cap, is that we brought up the example of one of the things that has activated a lot of our citizens about the clear cutting, and that's the North Druid Hills Wright Road development. And when you see a development lot of that size, and then at work session it was presented to us that even under the current ordinance, that clear cutting would not have even met the $62,000 cap. And so I think that it's important when we look at these changes that we figure out something that actually works, because just to change the cap max from 62 to 100 or 125, well, it sounds like we're being more stringent, and yet the reality is that same lot would be clear-cut just in the same way. And so I think that this is important for us to get data on what's really going to work, more effectively to address the concerns that citizens have about clear-cutting while being fair to property owners and allowing them to develop on buildable land. I think all we want is to make sure that we preserve this beautiful tree canopy that we've heard referenced many, many times. They're good changes. I certainly do think that there are some tweaks that we can be making to this ordinance that we need to figure out and make. I'm just not sure that the raising of the cap, while symbolically, I think it's great. I know that the reality is that it wouldn't address one of the issues that we know is has been an identified problem with our ordinance.
So there's a cap also on the recompense fee of 50 inches per acre, right? So if you had 10 acres, it'd be 500 inches total, right?
Right, it's per
So
acre.
that's where you can aggregate, is when you're talking about the inches, all right? The $100,000 is a cap. If it is an acre, it still would be a cap. If it's 10 acres, it'd still be $100,000. The cap is on the per acre inches. Okay, so why aren't we looking at that rather than the the monetary.
This was not from me.
Well, what is your suggestion on that?
Well, I mean, in the original ordinance version, I don't think we had a cap, so
Should we just remove the cap?
that's one option.
Let me just, listen, folks, I appreciate your enthusiasm for this issue, but with anybody, I say this to anybody, we can't have calling out from the audience because then things break down. It's just the rule. It's nothing against what you're saying or what you agree. We might all agree with everything you're speaking out about. Let's just make sure we respect the decorum of the proceedings and make sure we can engage in a way, we don't want to set a bad precedence. Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so I don't think in the original version we had a cap, so it can definitely be removed, it can be left in, it can be raised, it really,
I have to say, one of the things that, I was kind of reviewing the history of this, and there was no cap initially, and the initial recompense was 145, and it was kind of what I felt like watered down during the process, so I felt that it would be a good idea to go back to what was originally proposed of a 1.5 recompense and no cap. I have been willing to compromise somewhat, but if it really doesn't matter, I say might as well just not have a cap.
So, Kay, let me ask you, has it always been 50 inches per acre?
since the cap was set, I believe it was set at 50.
Because we really require a 100-acre replant, 100 inches.
100 inches per acre
Per acre.
is the preservation requirement for overall.
Okay, so.
This is strictly dealing with specimen tree recompense.
Okay. So does it make any difference if we change that 50 inches to 100 inches or change that number?
All it will matter is it's a little bit more incentive for them to hopefully try and save the specimens. But like I said, if it's in the buildable area of the lot, they are allowed to remove it, but they have to do the recompense. So, and the concerns that came up with that were you don't necessarily want to penalize someone who has to clear that buildable area to put a house there, and there just happens to be a specimen there, or 2 specimens, or 3 specimens, you know. So that was the idea, I think, behind the cap originally, was to not penalize an individual who is, that's the only place on the lot they have to build their house, or that would render the lot unbuildable.
Well, was it from the legal department? I understood.
Taking or something?
I understood one of the issues about the having to put some sort of cap was to have, I don't know, if constitutionality of the ordinance is really not the right thing, but that it would be an overly burdensome.
Also taking, it could be sued for taking somebody's property.
That the ordinance could be thrown out on its merits because there's not a cap. And that's, at least that had been explained to me at one point of why the cap was necessary.
Right.
But I think it's, I go back to this issue of, look, we're focusing on something that, in my opinion, it's irrelevant. Our worst-case scenarios in some of the clear cutting we've seen wouldn't even have reached the thresholds of our current $62,000. So who cares if we make it $500,000? The buildable lots that we have with assemblage, even town Brookhaven, is the size of that development over there, Wright Road and North Druid. It wouldn't have met the $62,000. So we're arguing over a substantive change to the ordinance that is irrelevant, in my opinion. I think the issues that you brought up about trying to preserve those specimen trees within the lot, not just on the backside, but, the other portions of the lot, I thought were substantive changes that made sense, that addressed, I contend that people don't want to see recompense numbers. They'd rather see preservation of those old growth trees.
Tom, did you have a comment?
My comment is this: if there's continues to be question or even confusion among the council as far as what it is that you are passing, then I would suggest you back up and.
No, this is on just for
Another time.
consideration. It's not on for approval tonight. We're not intending to pass it tonight because we're not ready. We got to talk about it more.
So you're just going to treat this as a first reading?
It's correct, as a first reading. It's consideration. It's not approval.
And then I would suggest, keep in mind that the cap relates simply to the fee that would be applied if it's judged by staff that planting to meet the recompense requirement is not feasible. Just to make sure you were aware of that. You may have been, but I just want to make sure that's what the cap relates to. And then you can add to that if you need to, Kay.
Yeah, because any lot, I mean, depending on the size, only holds a certain amount of trees. So if you have excessive specimen recompense for those 3 on a size lot, you can't fit all the trees back there. You may not have another location close by that you can plant additional trees, therefore it goes to a monetary fee at that point. And that's where the cap hits, is what you can't plant back.
Well, what is your suggestion on this issue? How is it done in other places, or, what is how's this issue, because you have a balance you have to make between.
May I offer one suggestion, Kay?
Yes.
Go ahead, Ben.
And Kay and I actually discussed one other suggestion, and that is this cap is triggered when the applicant applies for what's called alternative compliance. That is, they say to the staff, I can't plant back all the trees that the recompense requires, so let me apply for alternative compliance, and if staff approves it, then we can lower the number of inches required to be preserved, and we can pay a fee to make up for the recompense that I can't plant back.
Okay, all right.
So one idea we had was an applicant can request alternative compliance, but approval of it could, if you wish, you could consider having it go before the board, zoning board of appeals, or council. But that would require additional revision to the ordinance.
How long does that take? How long would that take?
ZBA would be 2 months, council, 2 months?
DBA typically is a 45-day process. Council would probably, well, we would have to create a process, because
Right.
it won't fall necessarily within the process that we have for rezonings, because that
Right.
takes much
I
longer.
would like it to be a quicker process so that, if somebody who's trying to build a home is not waiting 3 months or two, if there's an issue like this that we need to consider.
Sure. Generally speaking, I think the earliest we could do it is generally 2 months, just for the fact that staff needs the time to make sure that it's a complete application. We have all the required documentation in place, and it allows us time to review the request as well.
Right.
And if that was the case, let's say, for instance, our general deadline is the first Wednesday of the month.
Right.
So, for instance, if they were to come in February, then most likely, I think the earliest we could have it before council will be the second council meeting of the subsequent month, so in March.
It couldn't be the first council meeting of the subsequent month?
Well, if we're getting into there's a lot of discussion to be had in terms of, if we're going to make this a sort of a public hearing process, then do we want to go through the venue of advertising?
I don't know this, we want the public to hear about it, but I think we just need to be able to consider individual cases like that. And I wouldn't think we'd be swamped with them, would we?
Well, I haven't had any on single-family residentials. The only one that I've had come in was on a larger common plan of development.
Right, okay.
And we're going to have more of those type of developments coming through in terms of
The bigger ones?
conversions. Yeah, the conversions that you'll see of these existing apartments that may be impacted by the conversions into some repurposed use. So it's really hard to say at this point.
That's a little different than, for a big development, you're not talking about a single homeowner trying to.
Correct.
It's kind of like a MARTA redevelopment, huge
MARTA.
acreage, but almost no trees on that
Yeah,
lot.
we may have some of those. We may have something that, it's overgrown throughout the years.
Right.
There's a new development that's being proposed on an existing site, but there may be impacts associated with tree preservation. It's really hard to say what we're going to experience, because so far, we just had those larger residential subdivisions, and again, I believe, Wright Avenue, North Druid Hills, that was the most impactful one. But again, when we're dealing with individual building permits, we haven't had many issues of not being able to comply with the tree ordinance.
I'd like to see us, get sort of a citizens work, have a forum on this issue, open it up to the public, and get people on both sides to come up and talk about solutions and ideas, and have Kay and maybe that same person that we had from our original
We talked about this last meeting.
arborist.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, Teresa.
trees. I think it's, I'd much rather figure out a solution and, and try and really fix the issues rather than a tweak that doesn't really, it's symbolic, but still would allow for the issues that people are most upset about, the clear cutting. So I mean, I think you have some great suggestions that I've heard when we've talked about these things in work sessions, and Bennett, you've got a good one too. I am a little bit wary of putting people through a ZBA process when that's an expensive proposition for then an answer to be an expensive resolution, you know. I'd rather say it's expensive up front. You just have to know that. But I do think that it would be good to get citizens together and, you know, over the next, I mean, have one meeting, 2 weeks, and let's, you know, brainstorm it and see if we can come up with some real resolution for these issues that we heard about tonight.
I thought we talked about this at our last meeting, and we pretty much agreed in principle that John, you and I think, were leading the conversation on that, and principally, we would all have people from around the city.
Well, we're still in discussion about exactly what the makeup of that group would be.
I just think maybe not a town hall, but I mean, we need to hear from.
Yeah, I think he wanted to be more inclusive than exclusive.
Right.
I mean, rather than just a designee.
Or we can
As many people
we can get some suggested changes for the next meeting, and then publish those out and get comment back, and people can comment the way they do. They're going to comment tonight on this. We're going to hear comment, and I hope we get some specific language in the comments so we can hear what their concerns are. We went through a pretty lengthy process with our original tree ordinance. Made some people happy, made some people mad. Most people didn't care.
Yeah, but the one thing we did agree on was that it be a work in progress.
Right, and that's why we're here, working in progress.
Right, I agree, but I think this conversation about bringing in additional opinions from the community is a continuation of that work in progress.
I'm fine with the removing the cap, but what is the thought on upping the recompense fee to 1.5 to 1? I think will make a difference.
Tell us the difference it will make. Okay.
Well, it will make a difference in how many trees they have to plant and or if they can't plant them, how much they will have to pay. That's the difference. Instead of a straight inch, if it's a 30-inch tree, you're planting about 30 inches. Now it's going to be 1.5, so it's additional inches that they're going to have to plant back and or pay if they can't fit them on the lot.
And it will encourage
that's what
builders
yes.
to make more of an effort to.
Then they have to look twice at that and go, ooh, maybe I don't want to remove that one.
Yeah.
Kay, let me ask you a question. So,
because I think that's the thing that we're concerned about is, I believe in property rights, and people need to build their home. They want to build their home. But when you get a builder who doesn't necessarily live here, or unlike what Mike Elliott's doing with all the trees he's saving, you got the guy who's saying, get rid of that tree if it's a specimen tree and it's not on the buildable area. Make them think twice about it, and for the benefit of our canopy. And if you think that will help address that issue.
It will definitely help a little.
Yeah. So I say we go ahead and pass that portion tonight and revisit the cap and continue. Joe and I've talked about how we approach this, but continue with this.
So that's not either. Which change is that?
We're not voting on this tonight. This is a first read.
We can vote on it.
We can. So I think we can. I think we have consensus. I think we would have consensus among public comment as well as staff that it would improve it, and I think it is something that we don't need to wait on.
That's this one right here. It's the first change by 5/10.
The recompense from 1 to 1.5, which would they would stop and think about it a little more. And I think that is something that is definitely that we would want in terms of preserving the tree canopy. I don't think that there's one end-all, be-all solution to this. I think this is going to be a working process. I think we incrementally improve our tree canopy as we continue to. And that's why I didn't want to have one giant grandiose thing. I wanted to have a quick process, start the process, because coming down the line, this tree ordinance has only been in place for how many months?
Just under a year.
Just under a year? And it has, it's 6 months.
Even less than that, 6 months. Yeah.
And we haven't even gone through a whole season of building and waiting and tree planting. And so definitely something down the line, I think. I really don't want to pass something that will have unintended consequences.
Well, so make sure this doesn't have any unintended consequences.
But I really do believe that 1.5 to 1 will have the consequences that we do want. and at least having builders who don't necessarily, I honestly believe that a lot of builders make great effort to preserve the tree canopy, but there are some that don't, and there are some that just don't pay attention and say, oh, it's just easier for me to clear this tree.
Yeah.
I think this will encourage them to not do that, or at least look at the consequences.
Well, I do have hesitancy to pass this tonight, because we just talked about it in work session, you know, I'm not necessarily opposed to that change in principle, but I do think that it's too fast to, you know, having just discussed it at work session. I don't think
We've discussed it
heard
in 2 work
anything.
sessions, and I'm willing to concede on the cap, because there are a lot of good points that, you know, like I said, this is a process. But I honestly feel like in work session that it was general consensus that the 1.5 to 1 is something that.
Let me ask staff, Bennett or Kate, is this anywhere else in any other city's ordinance? The
DeKalb County.
1.5?
That's what we had originally under DeKalb County was 1.5.
All right, and do you see any unintended consequences?
Not that I can think of at this point.
Of course, we can come back and change it again if there are unintended
There
consequences.
is that.
We also debated this
You
as
have
part of the
something?
original, you know, tree ordinance debate.
Right.
I mean, because it was originally 1.5, and we debated about whether to lower it to 1 to 1. And as Kay said, they recommended it because our lots are smaller here. We're not talking about
Right.
the big undeveloped tracts that probably were part of the original DeKalb County ordinance, but I'm happy to go back to the 1.5.
What,
It also
this-
will up the recompense fee in terms of the replacement amount.
This section here, if we added this section, what would that have changed about the Roxborough Road or the Chamblee-Dunwoody
It would have,
scrapings?
that would have still been able to happen under alternative compliance. They would have just had to replant more trees for the specimens, and so
Would it have made
probably
them think twice
they've
about
got, the amount is pretty much all that lot will hold is being planted back. So what that would have done was give more of a fee at the end phase.
Right, it would have increased their
It would
their
increase the fee.
recompense fee.
Would have encouraged them to save a few more of the specimen trees, do you think?
Again, there was a lot of factors beyond just the fact that they're developing the site again.
I don't want to just, I want to make sure we're addressing the
Sure.
problem and not just doing it because it makes us feel good.
And I think this does, because, you know, especially in a lot of the smaller lots, you know, with the builder has to choose whether to save 2 or 3 trees, and to look at the fee, it will make them think a little more, particularly the smaller lots.
I would infer in the case of that development, the magnitude of the expense the developer's undertaking to make that development happen dwarfs the difference in the recompense fee. I don't think it would have made any difference.
That's my point, but
but in
regardless of
these-
the recompense fee, those trees that are saved, they're covered in ivy, like a lot of the trees were on the lot anyway. I don't know why they haven't chopped that ivy off or killed it yet. You don't think it would have had them, having this 1.5 would have helped them or encouraged them to save 5 more specimen trees on the whole property, or have they done the exact same?
I don't think the financial impact would have been significant enough to alter their proposal. However, if alternative compliance would have only been eligible to be approved by a board or a council, that board or council could have conditioned approval of alternative compliance, as an example, to specifically saving certain trees on the property as opposed to the ones that were saved, just as an example. Potentially.
But, yeah, potentially. I mean, obviously, there has to be a lot of thought taken into this, because, again, it depends how we go about creating that process. The idea is good, and I agree with the idea and the suggestion. It sort of comes down to the process in which it takes place, meaning if the rezoning went first, and that came after the fact, that may alter the plan that was approved originally. Just think about it now. So that may have further impacts associated with the development.
Right.
I understand we're sort of focused on this particular property just because there was a lot of interest, public interest. This is a unique aspect. Yes, they're not, because of what they're encountering in terms of the additional fees and the improvements that they're putting into place, like Bennett had mentioned, I don't think it made a major difference on this particular lot. But like Councilman Park said, If you're looking at a smaller scale development, yes, it's going to have a greater impact financially. So it depends on what we're trying to focus on. I don't think there's one answer to fix all our problems at this point. And one thing I was sort of thinking in my head was, for us to get a better understanding of what we have in terms of an ordinance now compared to what we came from, it may be worthwhile to use this North Druid Hills example to do a comparison of our previous ordinance compared to our new ordinance and see what the difference was, to get a better idea of, do we honestly have an ordinance that's better fitted and better suited for what we have in the developments that we'll see in the future?
Can you do that, Kay?
Yeah, I mean, knowing DeKalb's ordinance, I mean, that development could have easily chosen the 25% rule and only saved 25% of the existing trees. So you would have had about the same number of trees standing out there as you do right now. That's the real fact
And
of
I don't
that
think-
ordinance and our ordinance.
And I don't think that's the only, consideration is that one property.
Right.
Just hearing from the community, there's also a lot of concern about smaller lots that are getting cleared. And I've heard, stories of developers, builders just basically, not really thinking about it, just clearing it, and then, always like, oh, I pay the fine afterwards. So for that, I think we're all in agreement for smaller lots, particularly in District 2, where the lots are smaller, and just driving around Brookhaven, I feel like historically, there's been a larger tree canopy in District 2, in Ashford Park and Drew Valley, and there's been a lot of, I've heard a lot of feedback that we would like for builders to take a second look at some of the specimen trees they're taking out, and because it is, I don't know, I mean, Bates, we live in Brookhaven Fields, there aren't, the tree canopy isn't as thick in your neighborhood as it is in, Drew Valley and Ashford Park.
Pretty woody over there.
Yeah, I'd say it's.
Disparaging
Yeah,
district.
I'm just saying, I mean, that, we know what we experience, right? I mean,
Hey, now, hold on.
When we look out, that's what we see.
Yeah,
And so it hits a little closer to home for those of us in Ashford Park and Drew Valley.
Well, I think
Now-
it's a function of
And I don't think it
older
would.
neighborhoods.
Right, and I don't think it would necessarily impact the other neighborhoods to have this change.
Look, here's, like I said, I think this ordinance does need change. That's the basic premise. I agree that, we've got two issues, that we've got the big lot clear cuts that we don't really have a solution for, and we're not really proposing one tonight. And we've got the small single-family home issues where they're just clearing it completely blank slate and saying, I'm going to put up my 4 sticks, I think our ordinance.
We don't have that.
Right, I know we don't. I'm
Make
just-
that clear.
I'm just,
We do have trees
I'm
saved,
just
they're
using
just
it
in the rear.
as an example of what, there's perception that is
Right.
going on. I do think, one of the things that I mentioned, when we talked about this, John, was that, we do have to have balance when we make decisions up here, and that, we've heard the majority is one side of the situation. We've heard from a lot of public outrage about addressing this issue. We do need to have the input from developers on this. I'm not in the developers, on the developer's side on this, but I do think that's part of our role up here, is to have a fair ordinance. And I think that it's important that we bring them to the podium and give them a chance to talk about these changes. So I think that, in concept, I'm fine with, moving it to 1 to 1.5 inches,
1.5.
But the issue is I don't want to do it tonight because I want to allow the fairness for those people to come to the podium on the developer side to talk about it.
Well,
That's the same opportunity we allow for.
They had opportunities for many years in DeKalb County, and it
And
was working just
to
fine
tell
in
you the truth,
DeKalb
I was
County.
shocked. I actually am shocked that we went down from 1.5 to 1 to 1.
I am too,
I
which
think
is
that
why I
that's
want to change it.
That was a mistake. At the same time, 2 weeks is not going to kill us to make that change. This is an important thing, and I think we can add some more stuff to it.
Well, it's one thing we can get out of the way, so that we can focus on the other things. And I really hear no.
We agree to disagree.
I really hear no. I mean, it's been around DeKalb County for many, many years, correct? And I think we would have heard about it.
That's just
So
time.
I think we go ahead and pass that portion, and we continue our discussions on how we really, beyond tweaking, really analyze and deal with the issue, because I'm telling you guys, a lot more people care about this than you think. Just because there aren't that many people out there doesn't mean that people are not upset and care a lot about this. So this is a process, and we need to start the process.
Right, and just the final statement is I would say that it's important to get that feedback that from the developers to understand the impact of these changes, even that 1.5. As you've heard our staff say, look, on the big developments, it's a blip. It's not going to change the impact of their development at all. It may change it on the single-family homes, but I'm not sure. I'd like to hear that feedback from the developers. And that's why I say, look, 2 weeks is not going to make or break things when you talk about, let's address the root issues of really solving a problem that we all know is a problem. But if we just make a change tonight that doesn't fix it, I don't think that's the right way to be making ordinance changes.
I never claimed that it would fix it. It's a process.
Joe, anything?
Yeah, a couple of things real quick.
To wrap it up here.
Yep, this will wrap it up for me. Ben, you made a comment saying that there's no one solution. And just to clarify and address that, we're not looking for one solution. I think there's multiple solutions, and I think we all agree on that. John, I think you and I should get together and make sure that we put together a structure we can present to council on what could be a community-wide. We'll make a recommendation if you all agree.
Yes.
Come back to you, and if you agree, great. If not, we can massage it. But lastly, what we talked about during work session, and everything we're talking about tonight here, is about the penalties that we apply to the builders on this. And a key thrust that I'm going to keep throwing up there is to provide the incentive. What can we do to get them to be incentivized? Some of the points that we talked about, Kay, that I would like to have you come back next time is when we talked about having a progressive size tree and how we assess the fee on that. We upped the cost per inch to really make that dramatic for them to be incentivized. And on the potential for digging up trees and removing them, paying them 3 times the value of the cost plus 2 on top of that. And I'm really not opposed to John's suggestion that we pass the 1.25 tonight.
1.5.
1.5,
1.5.
I'm sorry.
It's at 1.5.
I'm sorry, 1.5, because this is a work in progress. And I have no objection progressing this along. I do want this, though, to be presented to the builders format. We have a builders development forum coming up. When is it? Oh, it's March. March what? Is
It's
it before?
March 23rd, but...
So it's after the 10th.
Yes, it's March 23rd. However, we do have an agenda in place. We can mention it. Just the focus won't necessarily be on the tree ordinance. It's actually Brookhaven 101.
All right, okay, yeah, that's what it was. And that's, remind me of the date of that?
March
16th. That's still after the 10th, but before the 24th, which is fine, because these are forums that ongoingly, as they continue to evolve here in the city of Brookhaven, I know I'm interested, and I hope my fellow council members are, I think they will be, to have these kind of ideas presented to those formats, so we can get feedback, whether it be a builders forum or a 101, or if topics of interest that we want to get feedback from. But I am interested, I do agree with Bates, we need to be balanced in how we approach this, and we need to make sure that we're hearing from all parties. And we may come back with some ideas from them that we're not even having a discussion on tonight that could be really impactful. It may not require 1.5. Who knows? I'm just saying. But that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, this is not on the agenda as something necessarily to pass tonight, but considering the discussion, I'd like to give the council the opportunity to vote on this one change here, and we can talk about changing it in the future or doing other changes, but if this was obviously something that DeKalb had the 1.5 rule, so I'll call for a motion on this.
Mr. Mayor, do you want public comment?
Yes, yes.
Okay, we have
I
Sandy.
was going to say call for a motion for public comment. So,
Sandy Murray.
all right.
I have to say, Sandy Murray, 3212 Saybrook Drive. I have to say that I really appreciated your discussion. I do support making the changes that are proposed in these amendments, although they certainly don't strengthen the tree ordinance enough. And I do agree that we need to have a continuing conversation about improving this so that it serves our community. There's such a significant cost to the community in smoggier air, more stormwater runoff, hotter community, and we are destroying the beauty of our community. Even planting new trees does not bring back that beauty. The problem with our ordinance as it stands just doesn't take into consideration those costs. And it seems to favor the short-term benefits to the developers. And so we're losing out on something that we have enjoyed for many years. Many people, including me, and I know you've heard from many people, are outraged at the tree destruction, and we'd like to stop it. We do need preservation of our old trees, even if they only have 5 to 10 years left to live. Thank you.
Next.
Lizzie Stallman.
Lacey Stallman, 1789 Gardenside Court. I'm so sorry for the outburst, but we got so excited when you talked about removing the cap. We just burst out. My bad on that. Okay, I want to thank you, first of all, for revisiting all of this. The sooner we do something, the more trees we'll save. So passage of the 1.5 would be great tonight. I have a little thing here. Okay, 62.5, talking about removing the cap completely. 62.5, based on no more than 50% being satisfied by alternative compliance, that would equal 10 acres, okay? The 100,000 that was proposed would equal 16 acres at 800, okay? So you're getting into the area where most properties aren't that big. The 125, which was the highest proposed cap, would be 1,000 times the 125, which would be 20 acres, which I believe is the acreage on this new Sembler development back here, or wherever it is. But there's going to be a time when, or there may be a time when somebody exceeds the cap. So why have a cap at all? It's been mentioned in work sessions that this is considered punitive. Well, I consider the cap a discount for people doing something they shouldn't be doing. You get me on that? If you're putting a cap on it, you're saying this is the most you're ever going to spend regardless of the number of trees that you cut down. So I'm fully in favor of removing the cap. The larger the parcel, the larger the profit margin to the developer, so the more they can afford it with no cap. I did a little bit of research this afternoon. I looked at Marietta, Smyrna, Forsyth County, and Gwinnett, all of whom have alternative compliance. First of all of those, it goes back completely to the tree fund, completely for replanting. I had thought that, and there is no cap on any of them. So as far as constitutionality, I don't see it. These other places have no cap. A lot of other municipalities don't even have a tree fund. You have to comply with it. But in fact, if you want to talk about punitive, Gwinnett, rather than litigation or going to court, charges more if you didn't get approval, if you didn't present your plan. So I really think the cap is a hook for developers. And I wouldn't want that to be the overriding message that Brookhaven sends out. Thank you.
Next.
Sally Epstein.
My name's Sally Epstein. I live at 1202 Gale Drive. And we've heard a lot of numbers tonight. And you know what I'd like to hear? I'd like to hear, we've heard how many trees have been planted. I'd like to hear how many trees have been cut down. And I would like that to be brought up every single time we talk about planting trees. How many trees were cut down? And I think that would be pretty significant. And I think that would give real relevance to what we're saying here. And it would be a little bit more transparent. Mr. Gebbia, you mentioned education. I would love for y'all to get some education about old-growth trees compared to new trees. What old-growth trees can supply to the ground, to the waterway, to the protecting wildlife. I was thinking, my art is I paint a lot of feathers, which is a lot of birds. And it was pretty shocking that I did not expect to hear a bunch of birds crying when I walked on that property. That was my last bit of concern. And to hear a whole slew of birds crying distress was really shocking. And I started thinking about it. And I thought, boy, if we get a whole bunch more high density, we'll be replacing all these songbirds with pigeons. Pigeons are pretty, but they're not as special as songbirds. We're in the forest district, and we've already got plenty of high density. We just don't need any more. We don't have any parks. So any protection of any kind of trees. And I don't know how many trees have been planted in the 4th District. And can anyone answer that number for me? So these are some of the real numbers I would like to hear, if that's okay. And I would also really like to hear a real dialogue with all of us, and not just certain people. I would like all the city council people to talk with this group and all the people that have been reaching out to me on this issue. And I love this city. This city's become my home. I've been here 13 years. You've been here longer. Let's really preserve the real beauty of it. And are these developers, are they living here? Are they voting for you? And I guarantee if you start saving more trees, you'd have more money from the local people to deposit into your next reelection campaign. But the more green you take away from us, I can't guarantee that for you guys. And I don't mean to be, I don't need to be rude, but this is really something, and I think you've been getting a lot of letters, and I think maybe you really are starting to understand. And so thank you for doing this. But please, the next time you come back, let us know how many trees you have cut down. Thank you.
Next.
Terrell Karstens.
Gerald Karstens, 2444 Oostanala Drive, speaking as a private citizen only. Just a couple points. I'm not as deep into the rules and the regulations and all of that stuff as my friends, but I do want to make a couple of points that I've mentioned this to Bates in the past, but I go to the Planning Commission meetings, I go to the ZBA meetings. I want to really emphasize that a lot of our local builders are never there. A lot of our local builders aren't cutting down trees. It's the outside builders, or did I say lenders? I meant builders. Sorry.
Builders.
But our local builders are making do just fine in making their designs fit on these lots, save the trees. They're not having any problems there. Another thing that they've shared with me is that when Kay comes to the property sometimes, you have to make a call. And if a tree has a gall on it or something like that, lots of times it's been said, this is what I've been told, is that it only has 10 to 15 years left. If that's the case, I'd like to reconsider. It's like if there's 10 to 15 years left on a tree, is it really the time to cut it down now? Or what is the hazard to that homeowner and that potential homeowner and their insurance and the liability for them? But maybe it's if a tree has less than 5 to 8 years life expectancy or something like that. I want to make clear, and when they read the ordinance, they said 1 5/10. It's not 1 5/10, it's 1 1/2 if you do approve
That
of
says
that tonight.
1.5 times. Yeah, well, no, it says both.
Okay. And then what has happened since this North Druid Hills clearing has been the Chambly-Dunwoody clearing. So it continues. And the areas in Brookhaven Fields, Mr. Parks, to answer your question, if you come by and look at Etowah and Oostanala, Fernwood Circle, Hermanson Peachtree, Ellijay, I totally see what you're talking about. The whole vision of the streets are changing. Thank you.
Next. Okay, any more discussion? I'd just like to say that, I appreciate the thoughts, and I've gotten some contacts by email from some of the citizens here and some other folks. I've heard from some other people who are nervous about making the tree ordinance more restrictive. One thing we got to make sure we understand, we have to balance interest between folks who passionately love trees. I think we all love trees, but there's some folks who love them a little bit more than the rest of us. And there's some folks who don't care a thing about trees. And some of them are some developers and builders or homeowners even. I just want to make sure we balance the interests of property rights and not get too emotionally caught up in saying that the city's cutting down trees or how many trees that has the city cut down. The city hadn't cut down any trees, I don't think yet, unless there's been some park work.
Right-of-way maintenance on the ones that are diseased or
Right.
dead.
And understand that, what Kay has so eloquently explained to us and has taught us about trees is that trees have lifespans, and some trees are small, some trees are medium, some trees are tall, some trees are 100 years old, some trees are 10 years old. And a healthy forest is not just old-growth, 100-year-old specimen trees. A healthy forest and healthy canopy is a 8-foot tree, and a 30-foot tree, and an 80-foot tree. And we need to make sure that we don't, because of our love for trees, and maybe have finished, have raised our kids and our kids are out of the house, that we don't deny to a family what we may have gotten when we first built a house or first moved into a house 30, 40 years ago. That there were probably trees cleared off a lot in the houses that many of you live in. And then trees were planted 30, 40 years ago, and now they're big specimen trees. So we don't want to deny the right of a young family to have a new home so that we can say we need to keep all the trees in their lot or more trees and dictate what they have to have, because that's what our vision is. When we lived for years with the advantage that trees haven't been cut to build our home. We enjoyed it, but nobody else gets to enjoy it. So I want to make sure we have perspective and balance in our thoughts and opinions, that we consider the needs of people of other generations and what they will enjoy and what they will grow up with, rather than just focusing, I'm not saying anybody's doing this, but focusing on what our preference is these days that might deny an opportunity to someone else that you had or we had at the same time in our life. So I just want to keep that all in perspective. I really believe in reason and balance, and there's usually a good solution right in the middle on things like this, where you balance the rights of people to enjoy their property and to have a new home or raise a family in a new home and plant trees together. I planted trees in my yard when I was 12 years old that are now 40 feet tall. And when I planted them, they were about 18 inches tall. And my kids enjoy them too. And I think that's a great lesson in planting trees, that you'll be able to enjoy them all your life, and later on as you get in your children, your grandchildren will enjoy them. So let's not get too caught up in saying folks can't or shouldn't be cutting down a tree on their property, or trees, plural, because we have a different opinion on what they should have on their property and how many trees they should have to keep. We need to strike a balance here. We need to make sure that we preserve a canopy, which I think is what our goal is to preserve a healthy canopy for our city, and that includes all types of trees, all sizes. So that's the only thing that I wanted to, as we go forward, because we're going to have more discussion about this, and I'm going to see you folks at the next meeting and other folks, and we want to talk and make sure that we're not taking it too personally and are not attacking folks, and we understand that there's a healthy balance for our discussion as well as for our canopy. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Could I make one more statement?
Yes, go ahead.
Javix? To me, this is a zoning issue. If you have one tree on a lot and it's in the buildable area, I'm sorry, it has to go. I agree with that statement. I moved to what is now Brookhaven. One of the main reasons was location and tree canopy. It is keeping with the character of the neighborhood, and I think it's important to maintain that character, whether it's, maintaining a setback so that you don't have a tunnel view of a house, or you don't allow, it's another factor of zoning, and I think that's where we have the justification for regulating this. I'm generally of the opinion that you should have the right, that if we are to regulate this, this is at the local level. And this is why I became involved in local government a few months ago, as opposed to something else. So with that, I move that we amend Article 2 of Chapter 14, Land Development of Code of the City of Brookhaven to
Section F.
Section F to one section to recompense by 1 5/10 instead of 1.
No, it's 1.5
Well, just-
times.
1.5.
Okay, so the language in the ordinance says
All right.
1 5/10,
One point-
parentheses, 1.5 times, so I don't know if you can say 1 5/10 the times. So I'm not sure, is there an engineer, Bennett?
That's correct. 1 in 5
So it
tenths
should say one-
times.
It should say 1 5/10 or 1.5?
It'd be
That's the same
equivalent.
thing.
Yeah.
That's correct, okay.
5/10 is a half.
Okay,
The equivalent inches,
okay.
DBH.
All right, just, you want to say as amended by the red line in the.
As submitted by the red line in the.
Section
ordinance.
F.
Section F.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I'll make my plea again to defer on this issue because I believe that the change that we're making is symbolic. And I also think that, as Ms. Stallman points out, some really good data points. I want to see more data on this issue. And I know that our city staff, and Ben mentioned this in his comments, that, look, you can take an evaluation of the clear-cut lots and see what the impact would be. And you can also, you have a different case when you're talking about single-family lots. I look at the house that I live in now, and when I bought the house, there were 3 mature 100-year oaks on the property. Beautiful trees. I mean, it honestly was a key selling point to why I bought that house. Within 5 years, the first 100-year oak died. At year 7 or 8, the second 100-year oak died. Now,
How many of you planted back?
I haven't planted back. I haven't planted back trees, but had those trees been cut down, I mean, granted, I didn't want the trees cut down, but if they were cut down, fast forward, I've been in the house almost or over 20 years. I would have had a 20-year oak in 2 of those locations comparable to the remaining 100-year oak that I have, and so there is a point to be made about preserving an adequate life cycle of your trees. And while I bought the house because I love the beautiful 100-year oaks, I also recognize that there is a replacement, sort of a replacement policy to these things. And I think that's what the issues that we need to address, the changes we need to address in this ordinance are really the substantive issues of that. Talking to developers about presenting solutions that are actually going to address the concerns that we hear from the public's comments about clear cutting. Because I don't think on a single-family lot, the difference of 1 inch to 1.5 inches is going to make a difference on that single-family lot. And so while it's a nice symbolic gesture, and I think I'm in favor of it, I simply ask again what I had stated earlier, that I think that it's important for us to be considerate of the developers and talk about the root problems. And that's why I had requested, look, put this thing off 2 weeks, allow city staff to come back with the data and find an actual change to the ordinance that's going to address the issues and produce the results we want to see, rather than what I contend is a symbolic change.
The reason I don't have, I think this is probably a good idea is because we had it before with the DeKalb ordinance, and I don't think we heard a lot of howling about this section. And if it turns out to be a boondoggle, we can change it again. But I think, I kind of agree that we have had, most of the comments we've had about our tree ordinance have been folks wanting us to change it for it to be, for lack of a better term, more restrictive. And so we haven't been hearing, we've heard some, but we haven't been hearing as much about these changes or about the proposed changes from folks as we did when we adopted the tree ordinance. So I think this, I kind of agree with John, and that if we can do this one now, if it turns out to be something unintended, we can change it back. But I think since we've had it before, and I don't think there's a problem changing it back, just to get started on making other tweaks if we need to make other tweaks. I think it's a good first step.
Before we leave this, I think we're going to be revisiting this a few more times here down the road for sure.
Yeah.
And I think there's fluidity to this, so you're right, it can go in ebbs and tides on any issue, depending on the validity of it. I do want to make a comment to you, though, Kay. Based upon a comment made tonight, I would also like to instruct you to include in our updates on this that if a tree is removed illegally, the fines be doubled.
I think we do.
Yeah.
I don't think
Don't we have some punitive feature in our ordinance about? Yeah. For every tree removed illegally, there's a penalty.
I'm not sure the fine is doubled, though, if we did it. Is it? Will you just check
That's a
that?
court.
The fine amount
I got you.
Yeah.
Right.
What about, and I would like to consider this, I don't know if this is doable or not, but we talked about it last meeting about the accidentally running into a tree or with a bulldozer or, that kind of thing where you've got a tree you said you're saving and then as part of our plan, and then you didn't take enough care to make sure it was, we don't want to punish somebody if a tree dies, through no fault of their own, but if there's obviously damage from equipment or somebody's not being careful, that maybe we look at how we deal with that issue too, because that happened on my property when I built my house. They were careless from their root system, and I lost one of my big 100-year oaks, and I didn't realize until after the house was done, and then the leaves started, so maybe
Now-
just explore how we can look at possibly, maybe we can, maybe we can't, but I'd like to look at that.
I agree with that. I think that those are some really substantive changes that I think I'd like to see addressed. And I do want, I don't want this vote to be the end of this conversation. I'd love in this, to have a commitment from the city that we're going to put a date certain to bring together some minds to have a discussion as we talked about and make some more changes to this thing. I'd love for that to happen within the next 2 weeks, to at least get it scheduled so that we can get people together to talk about this and really come up with solutions that are going to address the issues that we're seeing.
All right, thank you. Any more discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify so by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Well, there was a
Rebecca
second.
seconded.
She
Have a
seconded.
second.
So we were rudely interrupted by the clerk. Well, I guess all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, the motion carries. All right. Now we're on number
Number 4.
4.
Consideration and approval of an ordinance to amend Article 3 of Chapter 2, Administration of the City of Brookhaven to restate Section 2-21 in its entirety, to designate the established departments of the city, and to add new Section 2-24 to provide for the preparation of policies and procedures by the city manager or the designee of the city manager.
Okay. Did anybody have any issues with this? This is
There
just
was a mention about.
housekeeping.
We talked in the work session about some of the departments that were listed are not actual departments, they're functions of other
You want to
departments.
put this on the next meeting? Okay. Is there public comment on this item? Susan? Is there a motion on this one to move it?
What's the council date, next council
Fourth.
date? 24th
24th.
February. I move that we defer the consideration of an ordinance to amend Article 3 of Chapter 2, Administration of the City of Brookhaven, to restate Section 2-21 in its entirety to the.
Hold on. What do y'all think you're going? Let's mess with you.
To the council meeting on February 20, what was the date again? 24th.
Sorry,
That's
Mays.
it.
I apologize. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the deferral, signify so by saying aye.
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 You didn't say anything, did you?
We want to pass it.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay. Motion fails.
There we go.
Okay, well, that's probably not going to pass either.
So, Make a
Wait,
motion.
hold on. Motion doesn't fail. There's no tie. It is a tie.
It is a tie.
Motion, aye. Motion carries. We're going to take it up next, defer it to the next time. Yeah.
There you go. Good job, man.
Right.
stepped right in on that one.
You forgot.
I got to vote.
So how many times have you voted
That's
since you've
about
been?
4.
One per year.
You're going to have to.
All right. I did forget how to, I thought you were just not paying attention. You just, all right, that's fun. I'm sorry. Where are we? Chapter.
Other business.
Other business? Any other business?
No.
Public comments. Susan? Okay. 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 She's, all right. She's got her thing up there.
Got her running shoes on.
I just want to thank you all for your vote. Thank you so much. You have no idea what the small beginning step means to us, from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you. All right. Mayor's comments. Have no comments.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Well, I didn't get this in before. I wanted to let you all know that we've got a restriping
yeah.
project coming up on President's Day, and it seems like kind of a small thing, but I think it's a good example of where we've been looking for some, what I would call low-hanging fruit to solve some traffic problems. We have asked our Public Works Department to look at our roads and see where there's opportunities for a left turn lane or some other operational changes that could make traffic flow a little bit more. So on the 16th, which is President's Day, the children are out of school, and so in front of Montgomery Elementary, we are going to be adding a center turn lane in the southbound lane of Ashford Dunwoody Road, so the parents coming southbound won't have to block everybody behind them when they're trying to take their children to school. It doesn't solve the northbound issues, which is an issue, but it does back up when somebody has to sit there trying to get into the school, into the southbound lane. So just be aware if you're driving Ashford Dunwoody on that Monday, school's out, but we will be restriping, so you might want to take a detour or just know that there's a little momentary inconvenience, but I think it's going to help us continue to move traffic. You also may have noticed that we're just finishing up the permanent striping at the operational fix that we've made at the intersection of Ashford Dunwoody and Johnson Ferry. The barrels are gone. The white striping is there. We did look at possibly trying to, have an island there and maybe even a planting, but we determined it was too small for a tree. And the alternative was just solid concrete, which really isn't very attractive. And quite frankly, I hope that in the long run, we'll be looking at a long-term fix for Ashford Dunwoody and Johnson Ferry Road. So in the meantime, we're going to live with the white striping, and I hope you all are finding, like I am, that it is helping to move traffic through a lot faster, and the delays are less. At
It
least that's the
certainly
feedback
is.
I'm
Thank you
hearing.
for dusting off that old plan.
Yep.
It
So-
certainly has made a difference.
And actually, both of those projects that I mentioned, both the restriping at Montgomery and the operational fix at the Ashford Dunwoody Road, as Bennett mentioned earlier, really came from, it's the PTOP program, which is really funded by GDOT. So the only expense to the city on the Ashford Dunwoody intersection was that little piece of repaving, which we had planned to do anyway. So the utilities ended up paying for the moving of the power pole and that gas vault, and moved it over to the right-of-way. So it was actually pretty efficient for the city, too.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion for executive session for personnel?
I have one announcement. Application.
Hold me to the side. I thought I'd cede my mayor's comments time to you.
Oh,
Yes, I
well.
do. Okay, go ahead.
Applications for Bolt's race are now being taken.
Oh, yes, yes.
Brookhaven Bowl.
Brookhaven Bolt.
Right.
When is it? When?
That's,
Oh, well, Joe, come on, tell us when it is.
It's in the future.
Go to the Brookhaven Post.
All right.
That's
Well,
correct.
if you're a runner, be sure and sign up for the Cherry Blossom 5K, which will be March 28th
Third, fourth?
on that Saturday. You can run through the cherry trees at Blackburn Park.
All right. Thank you. Is there a motion for executive session for personnel?
I move that we go to executive session for personnel issues.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Any discussion? All in favor of executive session, signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We'll go into executive session, and when we come back out, we will simply adjourn.